What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Limited Resources. This episode number 371. My name is Marshall. I'm one of your Limited Resources, and joining me on the line all the way from Denver, Colorado, it's Luis Scott Vargas. LSV, how are you, sir?
I'm doing all right, Marshall.
How's the evening over there in Denver? It's a little late getting started here. It's past 11 o'clock for you.
Someone had a basketball game they had to play in.
Yeah. God,
Did you at least win?
No, we got smoked and I didn't play well. So it was a disaster on all levels. Nice. But I did have this to look forward to when I came home, which is the Aether Revolt set review, common and uncommon. That's right. We're doing the big one here. We're going over every common and uncommon in the set today. And our goal, of course, is to get you as ready as possible for those pre-releases and then the release the next weekend. And then going forward when you're doing your drafts on Magic Online and in your local shops and with your friends. So what we like to do is we like to break down every single card in the set. And we go deep. We know that that's why you're here, not to hear, oh, yeah, that card looks pretty good, next card. We go deep on them. But one of the things that we do is we also will end up grading them. Before we get into the grading scale, we're going to go over it again just for anybody that hasn't listened before. I want to mention our sponsor, channelfireball.com, the place to go on the internet for everything you need Magic related. That's right. You can get free content there. That's for free. You just show up and there's going to be articles, videos, podcasts from some of the best players in the world, all with the goal of helping you improve. That's what you're here to do. That's why Luis and I make this show every week. Is our goal number one above everything else is to help you get better at Magic, because Magic's more fun when you're winning. And you go to Channel Fireball, you're going to get the same type of treatment there where they're going to help you improve. They're going to show you sideboarding guides. If you're into Constructed, you can see videos of some of the best players drafting the newest sets, and you get a chance to see what their thought process is as they talk you through all that. That's for free. All of that content for free. And while you're there, you can pick up singles, sealed product. You can get supplies, limited resources, supplies even, t-shirts, deck boxes, and sleeves are available there. And, of course, you can pre-order Aether Revolt. Once it's ready to ship, they send it out to you. You can get singles or sealed product, get that pre-order in, and then bang, once it's ready, they're going to put it in the mail. They stand by their stuff. They're really good customer service over at Channel Fireball. Just a few of the reasons why we're proud to have them as our sponsor. Please check them out, channelfireball.com. You can also support the show directly. Did you know that? You can go to patreon.com/limitedresources. if you want to support the show. If this show's helped you out, if it's won you a couple of extra boosters, or if you just enjoy what we do and want to help us keep doing it, you can go to patreon.com/limitedresources. Really easy to get set up, and you get some cool perks and bonuses for being a patron. Go over there and check that out. You can look into it a little bit more. Okay, Luis, I alluded to the grading scale a moment ago. Why don't you break down why we do it and what it is?
So the reason we have grades is because at the end of our discussion about a card, it's good to kind of get a sense where it falls relative to other cards. To, as you say, put a punctuation mark on our discussions, put a bow on it, as it were. So don't just look at the grade. If you just look at the grades, you're not going to get a lot out of the review, but it's a good way to kind of wrap up what we're talking about. So we're going to divide these cards into a variety of categories, and I'll explain those now. The first one is the A's. These are the bombs, the game winners, cards that are good in many situations, especially when behind, and the best cards in the set. So you're looking at cards like Gisela the Broken Blade, Murder, and Niblis of Frost, to use examples from the previous block. The B's, these are cards that actively pull you towards their colors. They're go-to cards, reasons to be in a color, clan, or guild, and often populated by solid removal as well. So cards like Choking Restraints, Wretched Griff, Thermo Alchemist. Though that one, I don't think we started as a B. I think retroactively we're giving it a B.
We did, yes.
And so these are the cards that make you want to play that color. So these are the first pickable commons out of a booster pack. These are the cards where if you have 3 or 4 of them in sealed, you're probably going to play that color. C, these are the cards that make up most of your limited decks. Pawns of limited, as it were. They're interchangeable. You're going to play a fair amount of them just because you can't have all A's and B's. And they're all serviceable. They're not usually remarkable. The C pluses are okay. The C minuses are a little less than okay. But the general C's are just cards that you'll put in your deck and play limited with. Exultant Cultist, Spectral Reserves, Backwood Survivalist. These are just straight up C's.
Bread and butter cards.
Oh, yeah. D's are sometimes playable. You'd prefer not to run them. They're mostly mediocre to junky cards. Sometimes they're situational, in which case you'll see them come out of the sideboard, but D is specifically not only sideboard-only cards. These are cards that are just below the curve. So these are cards like Borrowed Hostility, Crossroads, Consecrator, Fogwalker, just not great cards. F, these cards are unplayable in virtually all scenarios. And again, these aren't sideboard cards as much as cards you just never want to put in your deck. So cards like Emrakul's Influence or Prying Questions. These are where the weird rares tend to go to.
Dubious Challenge comes to mind.
Oh, yeah. Sideboard. This is a category we have of cards that you're just not going to put in your main deck, but have a lot of utility post-board. Artifact enchantment removal is usually pretty good. Things that destroy flyers. These are cards that you don't main deck them very often, but you're happy to sideboard them in. And then lastly, we have Build Around. These are cards that clearly don't stand on their own, but when you build your deck around them, become kind of the centerpiece or very, very good for the good build arounds or too much work for the bad ones. Ghirapur Ether Grid is our go-to bad build around card, but the good ones like Shreds of Sanity or Take Inventory from Eldritch Moon were cards that when you built around, you felt like there was a good reward.
Right. And that's it. And, you know, again, the reason we do the grades isn't to put a final grade on it. It's rather a starting point, and the grades are fluid as we learn more about the set, but it's to give you at home a starting point from which to go, okay, this is one of the really good cards in the set that I want, or this is one that I'd rather do without, because sometimes you just need somewhere to start when you open up those packs when you get to the pre-release. And that's what this is for. But it isn't a final grade. It's just the grade that we give it with what we know at the time of recording. Okay.
And basically, if you give a card an A, that actually does sum the card up pretty well.
Yeah, it's going to be rare, right? That a card gets an A to start with and we're like, oh, that didn't get there.
Yeah, so A's the grade tends to speak for them pretty loudly, but the difference between like a B minus, a C plus, a C, and a C minus, you have to actually listen to the context for that. And those are the ones that are going to change a lot as the set goes on.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We highly recommend that. There are people who will track only the grades that we give, but really they're doing themselves a disservice because, yeah, they get a snapshot, but unless you listen to what we actually say about the cards, you're not getting the full picture. So let's get into it. We're going to start with gold cards again. There's another cycle of gold uncommons in this set. We like to do that last time as well because it kind of sets the stage for maybe what the two color pairs are trying to do. It gives us a hint, maybe a little mile marker along our way to see exactly what these pairs are doing. And we will keep it in mind. They don't always tell you exactly, but you can oftentimes garner a lot about what a color pair is doing. So our first one is called Hidden Stockpile. It is black-white. For an enchantment. It's uncommon. In fact, all of these gold cards are uncommon that we're talking about here. And right away, we see Revolt, one of the new mechanics. There's two new mechanics in this set. Revolt's one of them. So it says, and they all start this way. At the beginning, well, actually, they don't all start this way. At the beginning of your end step is how Hidden Stockpile starts. This part's always in Revolt, though. If a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, that's what Revolt thinks about. When it happens and what happens is dynamic, though. It depends on the card. You just have to read it. It says create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So at the beginning of your end step, if you have Revolt, you get a 1/1. It also has an activated ability. You can pay a mana and sacrifice a creature to scry one, which of course fuels Revolt. Now, the first thing that jumps out here, Luis, is that Hidden Stockpile says at the beginning of your end step.
Meaning that it doesn't work for chump blockers.
Yeah, you can't do it on your opponent's turn or throw something under the bus and get the servos. You're only going to get them if you're sacrificing your creatures or if you get Revolt some other way on your turn. Huh. Not a big payoff, right? Paying one and sacrificing a creature for the low... I mean, scrying one's decent, but that isn't what you would hope for.
No, this like self-fuels itself because as soon as you get one servo from it, and then next turn you can sack that servo to scry one, then you'll get another servo and all that. Mm-hmm. It enables all your other Revolt cards that are fairly low cost. I do think that it only triggering on your turn is a very good conscious decision. Otherwise, it would be a chump blocker plus a scry every turn, which would be a lot more annoying to deal with.
For sure.
But overall, I feel like this is a card you'll play in a Revolt deck, but or a deck that has a lot of like reasons to sacrifice things. But for the most part, this card is not impressing me that much.
Yeah, I like what you said there, because the thing that to remember is that sure, it has a revolt ability on it itself, but it triggers all your other ones for just 1 mana. Now you do have to sacrifice a creature, which can, to get the chain going could be a big cost. You of course can sacrifice your creatures in response to removal spells, or if they were going to get chump blocked, you can still get revolt at least, even if you don't get the creature back. Doesn't seem super powerful to me though. Like I wonder how revolt centric your deck has to be before you're really happy with Hidden Stockpile. That's the question I have.
I'm not looking to give this builder on grade. I would probably just give this a C.
Yeah, I think so too. There may be a deck for it though, so we'll keep an eye on Hidden Stockpile. Next is Maverick Thopterist. Good name. 3 blue, red for a 2/2 human artificer. And hey, look, this one has the other mechanic for the set, Improvise. I'll read it once, but if you want an in-depth take on it, listen to last week's episode 370. It says, your artifacts can help cast this spell. Each artifact you tap after you're done activating mana abilities pays for 1 generic mana. So it's a 2/2 for 5, but you can also make it cheaper by tapping your artifacts. It says, when it enters the battlefield, create 2 Thopters. Those are 1/1 colorless flying tokens.
Well, this card's just excellent.
That's awesome.
If you remember Whirler Virtuoso, that was 4 mana for a 2/2 and 2 1/1 flyers, with the additional ability of making things unblockable, which was relevant, but that was just one of the best cards.
No, that was Whirler Rogue.
Sorry, Whirler Rogue.
Yes.
Virtuoso is the one of these colors, actually.
Yeah, and it's also somewhat similar, though.
Yeah. That was one of the best cards in the set, Whirler Rogue.
Yeah, Whirler Rogue was amazing in Limited.
And Maverick Thopterist, even at 5 mana, I'd always play this card. It'd be a great card at 5 mana. And you can cast this for 3-4 mana, a decent amount of the time. I think that this is on par with other premium uncommons, which puts it at about the B+, A- level. I'll probably just go with B+, though.
I would go B+ for Maverick Thopterist as well. Fantastic card. And yeah, the 1/1 flying Thopters versus the servos is a big difference. Those things are completely borderline a card, and the servos are, they're approaching half a card sometimes. Yeah, I really like Maverick Thopterist at B+ as well. And it also shows us that we're going to be doing a lot of artifact stuff in blue-red. We've got Improvise, we've got Thopter making. So yeah, I'm into that. Outland Boar is 2 red-green for a 4/4 boar. And it can't be blocked. I was waiting for it. By creatures with power 2 or less. Yeah,
this is a beater.
It's a beater.
Outland Boar is just solid stats with a relevant ability. I mean, it can't be chumped by servos. They can't double block it with 2/2s. I would just say Outland Boar is just a solid B. There's nothing wrong with this card.
Yeah, this card just seems really good, and it doesn't really tell us a lot about green-red because this is what we often see, just kind of big, beefy
keyword
things.
Large.
Yeah, keyword big, exactly. So pretty good, though. I like Outland Boar, and any green-red deck is going to play that card and be happy with it. Not flashy, but it's good. Renegade Rallier. Should we start calling it Rallier?
Yeah, it's 1 green-white for a 3/2 human warrior, and it has Revolt. When Renegade Rallier enters the battlefield, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, return target permanent card with converted mana cost 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Okay, so it cares about Revolt when it enters the battlefield, and you're getting a permanent back for free, and it goes back to the battlefield.
And that permanent didn't have to die this turn. That's just any permanent that costs 2 or less from your graveyard. So even though sometimes it will be the same thing that died this turn, it doesn't have to be.
And it's a 3/2 for 3 in gold, which isn't great. Man, I mean, every time you get back a thing, it's really good.
Yeah, because then you're getting about 5 mana worth of spells for 3 mana and a 2 for 1. But there's multiple conditions here. One is Revolt has to be on, which is just not a guarantee. And then the second is you're not always going to have a 2-drop or less. I mean, that is pretty narrow and limited. It means really just 2 drops. There's not 0s or 1s that you're playing that often.
Right, exactly.
So I think Renegade Rallier is a card I will play in green-white, but it's like Hidden Stockpile. Like, I'm not picking that card and going black-white. I would pick Maverick Thopterist and go blue-red. But I'm not picking Renegade Rallier unless I'm already green-white, maybe have some Revolt stuff. It's just a filler card. So that puts it at a C, which I guess we didn't mention before, but in gold, you would almost never first pick a gold C because it's committing you too much a for basically no payoff. Whereas Outland Vor, Maverick Thopterist, maybe some of the other cards we're going to see here in gold, these are cards you would first pick, even though there's higher risk.
Yeah. And of course, what Luis is referring to is that whenever you first pick a gold card, you are less likely to play it in your deck than if you pick a card that's only one color, simply because if you don't end up in the two colors that the gold card is, remember, we're good, we're good drafters. We're staying open. We're reading signals. We're not just sticking, to the first two colors that we picked. And that means that there's a better chance that a card like Renegade Rallier is going to end up in your sideboard. And so you have to factor that in. It has to be really worth the risk in order to go for it. And I mean, look, this scenario of play a 2-drop, they go, sure, play a 2-drop. You go attack with my 2-drop. They go, sure, trade. And you go Renegade Rallier, get my 2-drop back is good. Like that will happen some percentage of the time, but every other time it gets pretty tricky to set up. So I'm with you, Luis. C for Renegade Rallier. What about Renegade Wheelsmith? It's dwarf cousin.
Renegade Wheelsmith is 1 red-white, also for a 3/2. And it says, whenever Renegade Wheelsmith becomes tapped, target creature can't block this turn.
Yikes.
The dwarf pilot, and the joke here is that you tap this to crew a vehicle and make one of their things something with a block, and you smash. You can also just attack with this and the ability triggers as well.
That's very good. If you're attacking, that is brutal.
This is a great card for red-white. It does exactly what red-white wants to do, which is it's an aggressive card. I mean, the 3-mana 3/2 makes their things can't block whenever it attacks would be great. The fact that you can crew vehicles with high power and also not risk the wheelsmiths even better. So this is just, I would say just a B. It's a good card in red-white. It's a really good beatdown card.
I agree. Renegade Wheelsmith, B. Man, that card's scary. I'm just glad it doesn't block well for the times when you are behind. At least it's not doing that. Rogue Refiner is 1 green-blue for another 3/2. It's a human rogue. And when it enters the battlefield, you get 2 things. You get 2 energy, and you get to draw a card. Ship it.
It's no Cloud Blazer, but this is a great card. I'll always play it in blue-green, and I'll take it early and go into blue-green for it.
Agreed. This is just straight value. I mean, that's what this card does. Rogue Refiner just says, I replace myself. I'm a perfectly acceptable 3/2, even if that's not exactly the stat you'd want for 1 green-blue. Hey, it's effectively free as far as card economy goes, and you even get 2 energy thrown in. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Rogue Refiner. I'm just going to play that card as often as possible. Like, my ideal deck already has Rogue Refiner and Maverick Thopterist in it. I'm just like running around with my arms above my head. I would give it a B. I'd give it a B.
Say. Yeah. It seems like a B.
Yeah, I just think it's very, very solid, though, it never knocks you down, right? You're never just like, dear God, you had the Rogue Refiner. It's like, okay, well, that's solid. That's good. It'll keep doing its thing. Okay, Spire Patrol. Now, last time we got Cloud Blazer in the blue-white. Let's see what Spire Patrol does.
Not quite a Cloud Blazer, but luckily we get another 3/2.
Okay, so what is it? Yeah, we do, don't we? What does this one do?
2 white-blue for a 3/2, flying human soldier. When Spire Patrol enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap.
What do we think about that? 3/2 flying for 4 in gold is not amazing, but it's okay.
And it locks down a creature for a turn.
Mm-hmm.
They skip 2 turns worth of blocks, 1 turn worth of attacks as these abilities work. So it depends on what the identity of blue-white ends up being, because this is fine in like a blue-white mid-ranger control deck. You always play this if you're blue-white, because stopping an attacker for a turn is great. But in an aggressive deck is where it really shines. So my inclination is to start this at like C+, but if you're aggressive, it moves up about half a grade, to a B- or a B.
Definitely. Yeah. It's a B- or a C+. Again, these cards have all been, I think, very finely tuned by R&D. Like, none of these outside of the Thopterist have been just like mind-blowingly good. Like, I remember when I first saw Cloud Blazer, I mean, everybody did. They were just like, whoa, like that is super powerful. And
or the Virtuoso.
Yeah, or the Virtuoso took a little while for us to kind of grasp, but even right away we just saw like, I don't care if you never make any energy, that's good, right? You're getting a 2/3 and a 1/1 flyer. This Spire Patrol feels like half a notch below that. It doesn't. These don't have that big hitting punch, but still, that's a solid card. Like you said, you're never cutting that from a blue-white deck. It's very annoying if you're
a fun card. So to reiterate, I'm going to give this a C+.
I'm going to go B- on Spire Patrol. Right. I like it. Tezzeret's Touch. This is 1 black-blue for an aura. It enchants an artifact. The artifact is a creature with base power and toughness of... That's right, 5/5. Anybody that's played with Tezzeret before will recognize that, in addition to its other types. And when the enchanted artifact, so the thing you put it on, is put into the graveyard, return that card to its owner's hand.
Right, so you don't get Tezzeret's touchback.
No, but you get the artifact
back. So don't put this on a token and expect it to come back. That is not how that works.
Right.
But if you put it on a real artifact, especially like a puzzle knot that has an enters the battlefield effect, you get a little bonus there.
Mm-hmm. I like that. That's pretty cool. What do you think about putting on like a really good artifact?
That could
like
also
as an
work.
Insurance plan.
You'd want that artifact to be one that still has utility while brawling, because you want to be able to attack with your 5/5. But yeah, it seems like that could do some work. I think Tezzeret's Touch is a fine card. It's interesting because it's not exactly a build around. You want an artifact heavy deck, but I'm not taking Tezzeret's Touch and building around this card specifically. In an artifact heavy deck, this card seems quite good.
It really does. I mean, it has that haste feel, right?
Right. You can, if you play a puzzle on turn 2 and you have Tezzeret's Touch on turn 3, you've almost won the game on the spot. You're attacking on turn 3 with a 5/5.
Yeah. For those of you that remember
Soul
Soul Artifact, this is similar. This one even has a bonus attached to it. It's a scary card. This is the type of card that leads to games that end that feel like they end prematurely, right? Where you're just like, well, we were going to play a sweet game, but then they went turn 2 artifact, turn 3 Tezzeret's Touch, and I just got smashed.
This one's at least gold, but it is still a very threatening card. I actually have Tezzeret's Touch at a B. You're not, with the realization that you're not always going to play it. It's not only gold, but it's a gold card that requires artifacts. But in the decks where this is castable, it is going to be really good.
Yeah, it gets pretty narrow. I'll give it a B- because the power level's there and the insurance plan is there. But yeah, I mean, you have to be these two colors and have critical mass of artifacts. It's not every deck that can run a Tezzeret's Touch. I think you'll get them, you can probably get them a little later just because there's so few decks that fit that criteria. Weldfast Engineer is next. It's 1 black-red for a 3/3. Hey, we got that extra point of toughness finally. It's a human artificer. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target artifact creature you control gets +2/+0 until end of turn. Now let's vanilla test this thing for starters, right, Luis? 3/3 for 3. Thumbs up.
3/3 is fine.
Yep.
Yeah, you'll always play this in black-red. It seems pretty cool because you can play this and first of all, you can crew one of your vehicles, then give it +2/+0. Just remember to crew it before the beginning of combat. You can make one of your servos into a 3/1. It seems like you can run your creatures into theirs and force them to either trade or take a bunch of extra damage. And that on a 3/3 for 3 makes this a fine card.
I think so too. The thing I like about it is that if you're beating down, it beats down quite well. But if you're in that mode, like you said, where you're just sending one vehicle over or sending a token or one of your creatures over, it just sits back, does a pretty good job blocking, and just keeps pumping up, selected members of your artifact creature crew and makes your opponent's life difficult because they can't just keep taking it. Even if it's just on a servo, you're like attack for 3 and they look at their creatures and they've got a 2/2 and a 2/3 and they're just like, I don't want to start trading these off for this stupid servo, and because there could easily be more servos where that came from. And the engineer just sits back like, well, what are you going to do? And in the times when you're ahead and you're leveraging the type of removal that you get from black and red, the Weldfast Engineer just hits hard. It's a 3/3 for 3. I mean, that's above the curve, period. So I like it. I think it's really good. I would give it a B.
Yeah, I have this at B.
Yeah, Weldfast Engineer, solid. Last one is Winding Constrictor. We talked about this one last week as it was one of our preview cards here in LR. It's a black-green for a 2/3 snake, which is already pretty good. 2/3 for 2 mana, thumbs up. And it says if one or more counters would be placed on an artifact or creature you control, put that many of those counters on it +1. And if you would get one or more counters, you get that many +1. So it adds a more likely than not in this format, it adds a +1/+1 counter whenever you get +1/+1 counters, and it adds an extra energy whenever you get energy.
This card's kind of interesting. In a straight black-green deck, I'd always play it just because it's 2 mana, 2/3, and you're going to have a couple cards just by default that work with it.
Absolutely.
In a deck chock full of energy and +1/+1 counters, this seems like a very valuable addition. So that still just hits it like a B for me. But there are some decks where this will be closer to a B+, and some where it will be closer to a B-. Yeah,
I would give it a B- to start with, but this could be the center. I mean, You don't want to underestimate those extra +1/+1 counters. They add up really fast. Even
if you get one +1/+1 counter from this, you got 3/4 worth of stats for 2 mana, which is
that's good.
Quite efficient.
Also does some energy stuff too. Yeah, I like it at B-. It's a good card though. Okay, that's it for the gold cards. Blue-red looked super interesting. Like that seemed to be the strongest one in my mind.
Once again, blue-red won, even though blue-red was the weakest overall archetype last time, I think. It had the best gold card, and this time I think that's the same.
Yeah, and interestingly, not that many people played blue-red, but a whole heck of a lot of, what's it called, got played. The guy we talked about earlier.
Virtuoso.
Yeah, the Virtuoso.
Or was it a Whirler Rogue?
They will never know. All right, let's move on to artifacts. The first one is called Aegis Automaton, and this is part of a cycle of automatons, and we'll see one for each color. They're colorless to cast, or I should say generic mana to cast, but they have colored activated abilities. So this one is 2 mana for a 0/3. They're also all artifact creature constructs, and they're all common. The activated ability, and by the way, 2 mana for a 0/3, I am not playing that, like, unless it has something pretty sweet attached to it. Now, because we did end up getting 2 mana 0/4 with Reach. I like that. That was decent.
Onslaught Skygate is one of my favorite cards from the first set.
Yeah, and I thought it was fine, but this one's not. But the activated ability, 4 and a white, 5 mana, return another target creature you control to its owner's hand.
This card's kind of funny.
This is too clunky, right?
Well, it's the kind of card that I want one of in my long game decks. It's a decoction module. Oh yeah, it's a decoction module's second ability that can also block their 2-drop if you draw this early.
Mm-hmm.
Granted, I still think it's like a D+, but in like a blue-white control deck with good enter the battlefield abilities, I'll play one of these.
All right. Well, I will not. I'm going to give it a D-, hanging on to playability. I just think it's really terrible. Like, it doesn't blink the creature. It returns it to your hand for a huge mana cost.
Look, when I start looping Restoration Gearsmiths, you're going to be jealous.
All right. I will admit to it when that happens. But when this thing ends up seeing almost no play in the format and getting benched, you have to be jealous of me. Deal?
All right. We
did it. Augmenting Automaton is the black one. This one only costs 1 mana. It's a 1/1, and it has 1 and a black. It gets +1/+1 until end of turn.
So the obvious comparison is a Sludge Crawler, which actually funny. It traded the black mana symbol from the top right to the text box. But without having the ingest clause, this does lose a lot of the punch that it had. And we did underrate Sludge Crawler to begin with, but Augmenting Automaton I think is just fine. I'm not really looking to play this card.
Yeah, I think it's pretty bad. Like, the problem with it is that when we were playing with Sludge Crawler, you could attack with it and then you would leverage what we like to call threat of activation, right? The ability to pump it if it were blocked, which would then encourage your opponent to not block. And then when they didn't, you would get a valuable bonus, even if you didn't spend any mana on it, with the ingest trigger. With Automaton, you get a damage through. And that's just not enough. Like, because in my mind, if I say, okay, no blocks, and you go pump it 3 times, I'm like, oh yeah. Like, you're not winning that game. Like, you can't just time walk yourself for 3 damage or 2 damage here or there. And it's not a good blocker because you have to leave all your mana up for that too. I think Augmenting Automaton just misses. I think that the 2 mana to activate it is just going to end up being a bit too much.
Yeah, I think it's a mana sink, which a lot of people were talking about how Kaladesh actually mostly lacked mana sinks, so the Automaton cycle does give you that. But
that's true.
It's not one you're going to want multiple copies of, and you probably won't want the first. But I could see decks that just want an effect like this, and this card, especially since it does enable Improvise fairly well, just being a 1-mana artifact. I could see this getting in there, like or in a Gear Seeker Serpent deck, something like that.
That's
a cheap artifact that's good in the late game.
That's a good point. Same thing with Aegis Automaton, also a good Improvise enabler as well. I'm going to go D on Augmenting Automaton. Where did you end up with it?
I will like it at D+, but not too different.
Okay. Barricade Breaker is 7 mana for a 7/5 artifact creature Juggernaut. This one's an uncommon. And it attacks each turn if able. It's a proper Juggernaut. It's also got Improvise. So you can tap your artifacts to help pay it. And I got to say, 7 mana, I don't think I would ever be happy paying for a Barricade Breaker. But if it were 5 mana, or God forbid 4 mana, then I would be pretty into that.
This is kind of like a Gear Seeker Serpent.
Yeah, it's kind of like
the
that.
artifacts is the biggest difference. Yeah, this is a card that you'll put in your improvised decks. I mean, this is one of the payoffs for having an improvised deck where you could turn 4 a Barricade Breaker with a good enough draw.
And I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, Cogworker's Puzzle Knot and any other crappy artifact, then all of a sudden turn 4, you've got a Barricade Breaker in play. And that sounds great.
Yeah, I do like that. And it's big enough. The 5 toughness, I think that's good enough to almost every time kill 2 creatures.
Yeah. What I like about where Improvise has landed is that because you would play this card if it cost 5 mana, that'd be a great card. You can put this into decks that aren't fully focused on Improvise, but it also scales nicely in decks that are. So it's not fully build around, but it's also a card that gets better when you do build around it, which is a nice bit of flexibility.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about the attacks each combat if able clause? How much worse does that make Barricade Breaker for you?
I think it makes the card better because instead of having to click to attack with it on Magic Online, it's already just going to be attacking.
No, it makes it much worse because you'll still click on it and it'll bring it back and you'll go, oh, dang it.
That's true.
Do the little dance.
No, it's drawback. Clearly, it's worse than not having that text, but it's not that big of a drawback on a 7/5.
Because that's what you're going to do anyway.
You're going to be attacked with their 7/5. So,
does this make it to the B range for you? I was going to give it a C+.
It's either C+ or B-. I'm going to say B-. I feel like this card is going to be one that impresses.
Okay. Yeah, when it comes out, when it comes out early, it is a beater. Hard to kill. Okay. Cogwork Assembler. What does this guy do?
This is the 6th Automaton. It's a 3-mana 2/3. You pay 7 to create a token that's a copy of target creature. The token gains haste, and you exile it at the beginning of the next end step.
Well, it's a copy of target artifact.
Oh, yes. Sorry. Target artifact.
Which can be an artifact creature.
Yes.
But it also can. But it must be an artifact. 7 mana. Now let's rewind a little bit here, though. We're paying 3 colorless for a 2/3. All right, that's par for the course. And can't we do something stupid with this card in the late game?
Yeah, you can pay 7 mana and get a copy of whatever enters the battlefield effect is the best on one of your artifacts, or actually any artifact, even your opponent's. And
if
it's a creature, you get to attack with it. Also, a minor note: this is an assembly worker as a card type, so you can get it with self-assembler. So
no way, really?
Mm-hmm.
Can you pump it with Mishra's Factory?
You can if you want to.
Wow, broken.
So
Cogwork Assembler.
I like Cogwork Assembler.
I do too.
Basically, I think that the activated ability is slightly worse than just 7 mana draw card, but I would pay 3 mana for a 2/3 7 mana draw card in a heartbeat.
For sure.
And there's times when it's going to be better. So I think that it's not enough worse than that to scare me off, and I think that would be good. So I like the Cogwork Assembler. I'm in for playing one of these. I'm not going to take it really high, but I think it's a good way to make sure that you've got something going on in the late game.
Yeah, the way I look at it is it misses on both ends, but only by a little. And what I mean by that is the 3 mana 2/3 is not super exciting, and 7's a little pricey for the thing you're getting, and sometimes it won't do a whole lot. But when you get both of them on one card, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm in. I'll take a slightly deficient 3-drop and a slightly expensive activated ability if I get both.
Yeah.
I'm going to go... God, I just feel like there's going to be stupid things that happen with this card.
Well, I'm still just saying to C, though.
You're just going middle C?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Ugh, I'm mad that you're right, but you're right. All right, Cogworks Assembler gets a C.
Ooh, this next one is probably one of your favorite cards in the set.
God, no.
Consulate Dreadnought is 1 mana for a 7/11. There's more, though.
It's like... There has to be so much more if you're going to give me a 1 mana 7/11
text. There's actually
vehicle.
only 2 more words of text.
That's true.
And that is true. Crew 6, because this is a vehicle. So 1 mana 7/11 Crew 6.
Don't care.
Basically, unless you're siege modifying it, you're not really attacking with this very often. Crew 6 is just so much. Like, you need to have an actual army out to crew this thing, which makes sense. It is a 7/11. It is as other people have said, but not open for business all the time.
Yeah, and usually closed. Yeah, Consulate Dreadnought is a I love it when they put cards like this in the set because it's exciting. It gets your brain going. But ultimately, these I think are a good lesson in that, when you and I like to talk about equipment, we like to really focus on the equip cost. And when it comes to vehicles, we like to focus on the crew cost. That's what we were zeroing in on the most when we were talking about the cards from Kaladesh. And this it shines a huge, shining, bright light where R&D says, we can make this thing just egregiously huge for a single mana. And as long as the crew cost is high, it's either fair or not even good. The funny part is that if you got two of them, they can crew each other, right?
Sure, yeah, you could, but that wouldn't get you very far.
It wouldn't do anything, would it? So it just does nothing. I mean, this card is just terrible, right?
I like that it's a demonstration of the principle that the real cost for vehicles is the crew cost, because the fact that you can pay 1 mana 7/11 is just neat that can exist. As for a card, I think this is an F. I just wouldn't play this card.
Me too. I just don't want to play it. Okay, so Consulate Dreadnought, I'm sorry. You're cool. Your artwork's cool. You make me think about things, and you're an F. Consulate Turret is 3 mana. This is a common. It's an artifact. It taps to get an energy. And you can tap it and pay 3 energy to have it do 2 damage to target player.
Yeah, I got excited for a second. I'm like, wow, you made a repeatable pinger at common. I'm like, okay, just players. That makes a lot more sense.
Right, that makes sense.
Not a big fan of this card.
Me neither.
Basically, in the energy-heavy decks, the second ability doesn't do a whole lot because you're not nugging the opponent for 2 for any sort of profit. And a 3-mana artifact that taps to get an energy every turn is just not efficient enough. And in the not energy-heavy deck, this is a really slow way to kill them. So I think Consulate Turret's like a D-. Like maybe you play it if you've got some sick energy cards, but for the most part, it's just not going to do enough.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. Consulate Turret D-. Crackdown Construct is 4 mana for a 2/2. At uncommon. Whenever you activate an ability of an artifact or creature that isn't a mana ability, Crackdown Construct gets +1/+1 until end of turn.
Huh? It's kind of hard card to evaluate because
I've never even seen a card like that.
There are not that many activated abilities that you wouldn't have in a normal deck. So for the most part, this card is straight up unplayable. I guess if you've got a lot of instant speed or good activated that you're going to use over and over again, that's going to attack as like a 3/3 or a 4/4 a good amount of the time. It still seems very bad to me.
So you go Consulate Turret into Crackdown Construct, and you've just assembled the combo of making a 3/3 for 4 mana?
And you get an energy every turn.
Yeah, this is bad. I think Crackdown Construct is asking too much. There's a decent chance that there's something that we're missing, but I mean... It's not even remotely good until it gets to 4/4 for 4.
Yeah, and even then you're doing a lot of work.
You're doing a lot of work.
Sounds like an F to me.
Yeah, I think it's just an F. Somebody show me. Somebody show me the Crackdown Construct doing broken stuff, and I'll reverse that. But until then, I'm going to need more than a hill giant, that you have to work for to get excited about. Daredevil Dragster, 3 mana for a 4/4 vehicle with crew 2. I like that. At the end of combat, if Daredevil Dragster attacked or blocked this combat, put a velocity counter on it. Then, if it has 2 or more velocity counters on it, sacrifice it and draw 2 cards.
Yeah, I kind of like this card. Also, the art's pretty cool. It makes it look like it's going very fast.
Indeed.
Which I assume is the idea.
Yeah.
So,
in fact, a little too fast at some point.
The fact that you get to cash this in for 2 cards after attacking twice, or blocking, I suppose, but mostly attacking twice, seems pretty good to me. It enables Revolt too, the turn that you sacrifice it. And
true.
It's just like a reasonably costed card that gives you an advantage after you use it twice. I like Daredevil Dragster. I think that some decks that are aggressive enough would rather just have this in play than the 2 cards, but
yeah.
Overall, it is a good deal to draw 2 cards after attacking with this multiple times.
Where do you put it on the vehicle vanilla test? 3 to cast. It's a 4/4 with crew 2.
It's slightly behind. Like, Renegade Freighter, of course, is like the gold standard, right?
Yeah, and that was a common. This is an uncommon.
Right, but it's still, I think, solid. It's not like very far behind or anything.
Yeah, that was my take on it
I'd
too.
give Daredevil Dragster a C+.
Yeah, I like that. C plus for Daredevil Dragster. I also just like the idea of keeping the game moving along by drawing new cards and kind of changing how things play out. Filigree Crawler is 4 mana for a 2/2 insect, and when it dies, you get a Thopter. It's a common.
All right. It's
so close. I mean, a 4 mana 2/2 is pretty miserable.
Yeah, but this is essentially 4 mana for 3/3 worth of stats, and one of those stats has flying.
It is.
And in a deck with sacrifice abilities, this gives you multiple triggers, or at least one free trigger.
Revolt.
I like Filigree Crawler at like C-, but it is a playable card.
Yeah, I think it is too.
I mean, look, if your opponent has a 3/2 and you play this, they're not going to feel very good about the situation.
Right. That's true. Also, it's multiple artifacts. Like it ensures that you keep an artifact on the battlefield. For you doing improvise and stuff like that. Okay. C-, sure, on Filigree Crawler. What does Foundry Assembler do?
This is 5 mana for a 3/3 with improvise, also an assembly worker, in case you want to tutor this one up too. Self-assembler seems like it got a little bit more interesting. You're only going to see self-assembler in pack 3 now as well, so...
that's kind of cute, though. You can still justify playing it.
Yeah, you'll have an assembly worker count by the time you see it. Foundry Assembler's fine. This fits more in a heavy improvised deck than something like the Juggernaut, because this, if I'm not like cheating this out for like 2 mana, I'm feeling like it's just not that great, because even paying 4 for this is just not very exciting. So this looks a little worse to me. This looks like it looks like a C to me, because I think there's going to be enough decks that want to improvise and can improvise well, but it's not a card I'm prioritizing that much.
Yeah, let's walk through this. Let's say you play an artifact on turn 2. Then on turn 3, you play your land. You've got 5 improvise. So you're still only playing it on turn 4, even with another artifact or a land, which is really not.
And it's just a 3/3. It's like not like the payoff.
It's like whatever, right? Now, one thing I could see, though, is you play that artifact, then the next turn you play another artifact and a land or something like that, and at one point you play like a 3-drop and this in the same turn.
Yeah. I mean, that
can be powerful.
That does factor in, because sometimes you'll run out multiple things in the same turn.
Yeah. I'm not sold, though, man. The payoff is just so not awesome.
I think you'll play this in the improvised heavy decks. You're just not going to otherwise.
Okay. And even then, it's what, a C or a C-?
I think C, because the C feels like the card where you'll have some decks with like 3 of these and it'll be like really good. But for the most part, I think it's going to be like a C+ in some decks and like a D in most decks. So I'm just giving it a C. But again, it's more like context based than anything else.
Okay, I'm going to give Foundry Assembler a C- just because of that sequencing issue. I just can't see the play pattern where it's awesome. All right, now we've got a cycle of 5 implements. Implement of Combustion is our first one, which you may have guessed is the red one. It costs 1 mana, and these are all very similar. You can pay some mana and sacrifice them for an effect, and when they get put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card. Of note, for all the implements, it doesn't matter why they went to the graveyard from the battlefield. It can be because you sacrifice them using their ability, but it could also be anything else if they get destroyed or if you sacrifice them to something else. So keep that in mind. This one is red. You pay a red and sacrifice it to do 1 damage to a player. Dear God. What a horrible card.
I swear I read an article that said you could hit creatures.
No, that does not exist. That was immediately edited. Yeah, it's bad. It's just bad.
Basically, you'll play this if you have revolt cards or improvised cards, but don't just think like, oh, I've got 2 improvised cards, I'll play this, or I've got a revolt card, I'll play this. You're playing a real cost, because you're paying 2 mana to cycle this, and if you want to use it for improvise, you have to let it stay in play. If you want to use it for revolt, you have to wait till you draw your revolt card, which means you're not getting your card back out of Implement of Combustion. So I think it's a D.
I just give it an F. I just feel like you could find other cheap artifacts for improvise or cheap revolt.
Put this in your deck sometimes.
Man, you're gonna have to talk me up to D-. I'm just gonna go F. I just don't think you'll ever put this in your deck. Yeah, you're gonna find something better. Let's look at the blue one. This is Implement of Examination. It's 3 mana. This one costs 3, but it's blue. Sacrifice it to draw a card, and then, like I said, when it goes to the graveyard, you draw a card. So 4 mana Divination.
Well, it's 4 mana, but it's split up, which is nice, and it does trigger revolt and count for improvise. It's slightly too inefficient to just put in a deck. Like, you shouldn't just put this in your deck because you want to pay 4 mana to draw 2 cards. At least most people shouldn't. But
are you excluding yourself from that group?
I might have some purposes for this. If you do have Revolt or Improvise or Gearseeker Serpents, then this all of a sudden it does kind of justify itself. So I don't think it's great. I think it's a C minus, but I think that you're going to put it in some decks and it's a lower cost enabler because at the end of the day, it is card advantage still.
Yeah, this one I'm much more excited about. I'd give it a C minus or a C for Implement of Examination. Next is Implement of Ferocity. This one's kind of cool because it has something a little different than the others. It's 1 mana, and it's the green version. You sacrifice it to put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Now, you can only do it when you could cast a sorcery, so it's not a combat trick per se, but it is, it does make your creature bigger, and it leaves that 1/1 counter behind. It's not a temporary effect that you gain. And then, of course, you still get that card, and that's for the cheapest possible. 1 to cast, green to sack. I like that.
Yeah, this is a fine card. I don't think any of the implements really justify themselves without these other things going on, the Improvise and the Revolt. But,
no, I think the blue one's the closest.
Yeah, even then it's a little inefficient. But Implement of Ferocity, it feels like you get a real benefit without paying too much of a cost. So this is one of the ways I would not mind enabling those. So this, again, gets a C minus for me.
Yeah, same thing. Next is Implement of Improvement. This is the white one. It's 1 mana, white to sack it, and you gain 2 life.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of this one. I like the Combustion Implement. I would give this a D because I think there's some decks that really just want 1 mana artifacts, but the effect is just nothing.
So I'm going to give this one a D, even though I gave the Implement of Combustion an F. And the reason for this is that I think that white cares more about Revolt in general. And so I think that this one will occasionally see play, even though the effect is actually perhaps worse. Okay, last one, Implement of Malice is 2 mana. This is the black one. You pay a black mana and sacrifice it to have your opponent discard a card. And once again, you can only do this as a sorcery, of course, to prevent people from doing this on your draw step. So they discard a card, you draw a card.
Like Implement of Examination, this is actual card advantage, and like all the other implements, I'll put this in the decks that care about this. Black, actually, in particular, has a number of cards that sacrifice artifacts for gain in both Kaladesh and Aether Revolt, and wants artifacts in play for its cards that just need you to be controlling an artifact. So Implement of Malice seems like, still a C minus, but that's on the higher end of the implement scale.
Yeah, I think C minus. C minus plus. What about Iron Tread Crusher?
Not a big fan of this one. This is 4 mana for a 6/6 vehicle at common. It has crew 3.
Pretty straightforward.
It's just like if you have a lot of 3x creatures, like 3 power creatures, and you're an aggressive deck, then you can play this. But if you ever have to stack multiple creatures in order to crew this, it becomes a lot less impressive.
Yeah, I think that if this were in Kaladesh, I would have been much more impressed by it. But after having seen Crew 3 be pretty expensive and just kind of have big and dumb, I'm not super thrilled. I would give it a C. I do think it's a card that people will play sometimes. It is only 4 mana, and the crew cost isn't ridiculous. And a 6/6 is nice and big. This does hit the middle of something. It's just not the kind of card I get excited about at this point.
Yeah, I think C is fine for Iron Tread Crusher.
A little bit different here. Similar card. It's Mobile Garrison. This one's 3 mana for another vehicle. It's a 3/4 with crew 2. So the significant bump down to crew 2, but it's only a 3/4 versus a 6/6. But whenever it attacks, you untap another target artifact or creature you control. Kind of weird.
No, you can't untap what crewed it and attack with that creature because you're already attacking at that point. But
that's right. But you can untap it.
You can block with it. Mobile Garrison seems pretty weak to me. It's just 3 mana for a 3/4 is not even that far above the curve for a creature. It is above the curve, but not tons.
No,
in fact, you have the crew 2, and then you're untapping things for medium value. So this looks like a D to me.
It's a D. Mobile Garrison's the D. I mean, we weren't even excited about Iron Tread Crusher. It's a 6/6 for 4. Yeah. What about Night Market Guard?
This is a 3 mana for a 3/1 artifact creature construct at common, and it can block an additional creature each combat. So
it's kind of weird to have one toughness.
Mediocre.
Yeah. It should say it can block an additional creature each combat once.
Yeah. I like Night Market Guard at D+. It's
Yeah.
like slightly below filler.
Yes, it is still a 3-powered creature for 3 to use to crew your vehicles or to attack if you can clear the way, but 1 toughness is pretty brutal. Oh no. Luis, it's back. Ornithopter.
Look, every civilization artificers invent the Ornithopter. Why would Kaladesh be an exception?
Yes, you are correct. So 0 mana, 0/2 with flying. It's a Thopter. It's uncommon. Luis, how many of our listeners are going to play this thing in the pre-release? How many can we? How close to 0 can we get?
Probably about 10% is my guess. Maybe a little less. Maybe no. I think actually I'm revising it downwards. But look, I understand how it is. When I first saw Ornithopter, I thought this card was quite powerful.
Me too.
It's a 0 mana card. It's free. Why would there be a drawback? It's literally free. The problem is Ornithopter doesn't actually do anything. This is not a card you should put in your limited deck. Just 0 mana for a 0/2 just does not do anything.
Right. So, now, I think that we're going to get the argument of improvise. Right.
Yeah, it's just not good enough.
I still don't think it's good enough, even if it's tapping for improvise. Please just stay away from Ornithopter for me. Just do it for me.
Unless you get a cranial plating somehow, this is an
F. Yeah, it's an F. I will be polishing off ye old soapbox for that one, I'm sure, down the line. What is this? Pacification Array? This is what does this do?
1 mana and for an artifact, and you pay 2 and tap it, and you tap target artifact or creature. So
it's like Icy?
Yes, it costs 2 to activate, though. I actually don't mind this card. At 1 mana, it enables your improvised cards and your Gear Seeker Serpents quite nicely. And 2 tap to tap a artifact or creature is removal, even though it costs you a lot of resources. Like, basically, you don't want to activate this until turns like 7+. So don't put this in your deck and expect it to be a great removal spell, but it does actually trade for whatever the current best creature is, or artifact, I suppose.
Yeah, I've fallen for this time and time again for the 2 mana to tap something, and I'm going to do it again. I'll never learn my lesson. I'm going to give Pacification Array a much higher grade than I'll probably give it in a month. And it'll probably just end up being one of those mediocre cards that nobody cares about. But I just like effects like this, and I can't help myself. So I'm going to give it a B-.
I have it at C+.
Yeah, well, you're probably closer to correct. Prizefighter Construct. 5 mana, 6/2.
Yeah, this is not a card I'm going to put in any of my decks. I actually think this is an F.
It's just an F, right? This is
2 toughness for 5 mana, no evasion. This is just not what you want in your deck.
I mean, you know why it's here. It likes to make some trips to 7-Eleven.
Oh, yeah. I guess that's true. It can enable the barge or whatever it's called.
Yeah, what is it called? It's called the
Consulate Dreadnought.
Dreadnought. Okay, F for Prizefighter Construct. Renegade Map. This card's cool. 1 mana artifact that enters the battlefield tapped. So just 1 mana. But here's the important part. You can tap it and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it in your hand and then shuffle. But the wrinkle here is that there's no mana cost associated with sacrificing it.
No. And so this is the best, or one of the best Revolt enablers, because it costs 0 mana.
0 mana.
So you can play your Revolt card on curve. It also is an improvised card. If you're hitting your land drops anyway, you can sit there and use this to improvise. Then as soon as you're going to miss a land drop, you just sack this and go get your land. So that said, I wouldn't put this in a deck without those cards. Otherwise, because it's a 1 mana. Like, imagine you're missing a land drop and you draw this. And you play this tap, have to say go. Then next turn you get to make your land drop. Like, this is significantly worse. I guess it's just like an Evolving Wilds that costs a mana. But
yeah, that's a good way to describe it. But I mean, even sometimes the Tune with Ether feels too slow. That this is a turn slower than that.
So I'm going to give Renegade Map a C because I think enough decks will want it. But you have to have a reason to put this in your deck. Like if you're playing 3 colors, that is a reason. If you have improvised cards or Revolt cards, those are reasons. But don't put this in your just normal 2-color deck with none of those abilities.
Yeah, I'm giving Renegade Map a C+, and I think this is going to be a hotly contested card. I think this card is a real
prism of the set.
It might be. I honestly it does enough stuff for each of the 2 major mechanics, and it does a really good job of both, and then enable splashes too.
All right.
Reservoir Walker. What does this guy do?
Texas Ranger. It's a 5 mana 3/3.
There's not that many reservoirs in Texas, though.
No, that's very dry. True. It's a 5 mana 3/3 construct at common, and when it enters the battlefield, you get 3 life and 3 energy.
So how energy specific do I need? Because I don't think I'd be too excited about 5 mana, 3/3, gain 3 life, though.
Nope.
Wouldn't hate the 3 life. It's just not good enough the body's just not there. So the energy for me is the question is that enough to push it over the edge? It doesn't really feel like it.
I would not put this in a deck without energy, but even in decks with energy, I'm not really that thrilled with this.
Yeah, that's what I think too. It's just that stats just don't hold up. That's the problem.
Yeah, so I'm going to give Reservoir Walker, I guess, a D- because it's not that bad if you have to play it. It's just not that exciting.
Although I have a prediction.
Yeah?
Me? Will be using your Cogwork assembler to copy Reservoir Walkers at some point in this format.
Yeah, I guess that does sound like something I would do. But
yes.
I still think Reservoir Walker is not a card you should be putting in your deck.
Yeah, it's like a D, right?
Yeah. I gave it a D-, but whatever, D-.
Yeah, somewhere in that range. Servo Schematic. This is one that looks interesting to me. It's 2 mana for an artifact, and when it enters a battlefield or is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you get a 1/1 servo. And it's an uncommon. Why?
It's a little weird.
Isn't this just a lot worse than the Puzzle Knot, the White Puzzle Knot?
It is much worse than the White Puzzle Knot because
you have to really work.
The reason it's not is because if you sacrifice this as a cost to another effect, you get the 1/1, whereas the Puzzle Knot wouldn't give you a 1/1 in those situations. But for the most part, this is worse than Cogworker's Puzzle Knot. What I do like about it is this is a turn 2 play that lets you improvise out a 5-drop on turn 3.
I like that.
And then if you have ways to sacrifice this, you do get some value later. But this is very clearly an enabler, not a card you should just put in a random deck. In a random deck, this is terrible. It's 2 mana for a 1/1.
Right. But so is this our turn 3 Foundry Assembler?
This is our turn 3 Foundry Assembler. Okay. It's not, so this isn't a build around, but I would say, I don't know, it's kind of hard to give it a meaningful grade.
Yeah.
In terms of how often you're going to play it, it's closer to a D. You're not going to play it that often, but the decks that want it will definitely be happy playing it. So I guess that means it's like a C-level build around.
It is a build around. Yeah, it's a C build around.
It's just like part of the enablers that make the improvised deck work or make the, black sacrifice artifact deck work.
Yeah, see, and this does go back, by the way, to our grade on Foundry Assembler, where we're like, okay, we did it. Servo Schematic into turn 3, but that's still not good. We've still played a 2 mana 1/1, and for the big payoff of a 3 mana 3/3, which is a good creature, but no. Anyway, build around C for Servo Schematic. Treasure Keeper is 4 mana for a 3/3 construct artifact creature. It's uncommon. It says when it dies, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card with converted mana cost 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put all revealed cards not cast this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. Whoa.
So reverse Bloodbraid Elf. This card's great.
That's really good.
Yeah, it's 4 mana for a 3/3 that draws you a card and up to 3 mana because you cast the card. So
that's cool.
Nothing wrong with this card. I think this card's a B+.
Yeah, I'd give it a B. You're probably closer. We'll see, but whatever. Treasure Keeper's really good. That's a card that you're just going to play. Yeah. And the fact that it's colorless too, it makes it probably a pretty good first pick.
That's a 2-for-1 that also casts the card. I mean, that's just great.
That's just great. I like that.
Can't draw a land off it either. You draw a spell off it, an actual card.
It'll keep going until it finds something that you can cast. I like that. Universal Solvent. I want to hear your take on this one. It's 1 mana for an artifact. It's common. It says 7, tap, sack it, destroy target permanent.
So
that's
by itself, this card is heinously inefficient. You would never put this in your deck. I'm not in for paying 1+7 to destroy something.
Right.
If you have a lot of improvise, all of a sudden this becomes a little more appealing because if it taps for mana 2 or 3 times, then you kind of got a good deal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That means that you're just not going to play it very often, though, because it's just too expensive. So my guess is this is similar to Servo Schematic in that if in a deck that would play Servo Schematic, you probably play Universal Solvent. It's like a build around C. And it's nice that it does late game give you an answer to anything, from your early game mana source. But yeah, for the most part, this is not a card you should have in your deck.
Yeah, that was my take on it too. 7 so much. Why couldn't they have made the 7 improvise? I don't know how to do that with the rules, but that's what I want. Sure. Okay. Next is Untethered Express. It's another uncommon vehicle. This one's 4 mana for a 4/4 with trample. And whenever Untethered Express attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on it. So even the first time it attacks as a 5/5 trampler and stays that way, meaning the counter stays. So you'd expect the crew cost to be kind of stiff on this. It's 1.
This is like the more reasonable Renegade Freighter.
Is it? God, I wonder if it's even better. Like it comes down a turn later, which is a major cost.
Is the thing.
Oh yeah, that's true. But this thing attacks as a 5/5 with trample and doesn't get smaller after that.
No, I think Untethered Express is quite good. This looks like a B+ to me.
Oh, it's off the chain, all right. Yeah, I agree. Untethered Express, especially at colorless, for a crew cost of 1 is just absurd. This is just stupid. Like, oh, I'm going to hate this car. I'm going to be like, I had a sweet deck, and then this thing happened. And sometimes I'll draft it myself. All right, we got a couple more here. Verdant Automaton. This is the green version of that Automaton cycle that we touched on earlier. It's 2 mana for a 1/2. All of these are pretty unexciting. This one's interesting, though. 3 and a green, and you get to put a counter on it.
A +1/+1 counter.
Yeah,
I'm not really in for Verdant Automaton.
Isn't this the best one? We got one more to talk about, or 2 more to talk about.
2 more. I think it's a little worse than the blue one, actually. But
okay, we'll talk about that. At least you get to keep the counter like it's a mana sink late, but it's so not exciting. It is a mana sink. It
just takes so long, and until you activate it once, the 2 mana 1/2 is like barely a card. So
yeah, it's bad.
I think it's a D+.
I do too. I think all these automatons have been bad though. They're just so expensive to activate. How about Watchful Automaton? This was the one you just mentioned. Yeah,
3 mana for a 2/2 automaton. It's a tuna blue and gives you scry 1. I like this one because 3 mana for a 2/2 is a card that you can actually trade off in the early middle of the game, and then scry 1 is a reasonably powerful late game ability. This is the kind of mana set I want in the late game. Sure. I don't want to pay 4 mana to put a ++1 counter, or when we look at Welder Automaton, pay 4 mana to deal 1 to your opponent. If you're in a board stall and you scry a couple times off this, you're significantly far ahead. So,
oh yeah, and we've all been in that spot before where each player has 7 or 8 mana, and it's like, oh, I just need some action, and the person with this is at a huge advantage. Remember, you can activate it multiple times in a turn if you have enough mana.
Yeah, so I'm going to give Watchful Automaton a C. I like having one of these in my deck.
Yeah, I think C is about where it lands. I mean, these are still not good.
I'm not saying these cards are great.
Yeah, but agreed, compared to their friends.
Worth keeping an eye on.
Right. The last one is Welder Automaton. You made reference to it, and I think this one's actually pretty decent. It's 2 mana for a 2/1. So this one actually holds up in stats, at least on some level, even if it's not exciting. And you can pay 3 and a red to have it deal 1 damage to each opponent.
Yeah, the activated is not a game breaker, but 2 mana for a 2/1. Your aggressive deck wants 2 mana 2/1s. It's a cheap artifact, and then in the late game, maybe you ping your opponent for a couple of turns, and then all of a sudden they actually have to deal with it. So
yeah, you know what I really like about this card? It fits your curve, and it helps beat down. But how many times have you had a quick aggressive start, but they killed your vehicle, and then they stabilized, and they're at 4 or 6?
This does actually peck them pretty fast.
Yes, this is like, hey, you better have another removal spell for this stupid little 2/1. If you don't, you're going to lose this game.
Yeah,
I like that. I like that in a 2-drop that's a common that I don't think is going to be like hotly contested. I think this is a decent one. So yeah, I'd give it a C. Probably still just a C for me, but like this is still coming together. Yeah. Okay, so Welder Automaton gets a C, and that will do it for the artifacts. And that brings us to the first of our colors. We're going to do them starting with red. We like to kind of rotate which one we start with. And the first card in red is called Ether Chaser. It's 1 and a red for a 2/1 human artificer with first strike. And this is actually part of a cycle. And it's going to remind you of the cycle of cards that we got out of Kaladesh that give you 2 energy when they enter the battlefield. And when they attacked, you could use 2 energy to make a +1/+1 counter. These are almost the same, except for that instead of getting a +1/+1 counter, you get a 1/1 servo instead. So, and there's one for each color. This one, again, is 1 and a red for a 2/1 first strike, and then with all that extra text on it. I mean, it seems fine. Like a 2/1 first strike tends to do pretty decently. We saw that from what's it called? The white one in Kaladesh.
Yeah, gives the vehicles first strike the pilot. Mm-hmm. I like how one set later we're just like, we're off the name.
Blanked it, yeah. Even though it's like still live in this set. That's funny. But what do we think about Ether Chaser?
So the key about all these cards in this cycle is, just much like the thriving cycle is, will it get a successful attack in? Can you safely attack with it? Because otherwise you don't really get value out of the trigger. Ether Chaser, you should. 2-1 first strike is a great attacker early, good blocker at any point. And even later there's going to be times when you can attack, especially if you have a combat trick. And getting a servo is good. I mean, it helps with improvise. It just is a little bit of value. I think Ether Chaser is great. This is one of the best ones in the cycle, spoilers. And I actually have it at like B-.
Oh, you have it that high. I was going to give it a C+, but I could see it being a premium common for red just because of its ability to attack well, works well with combat tricks, and even gives you energy that you can use for something else or to generate an additional attacker. That's all pretty powerful stuff for only 2 mana.
Yeah, I'm just going to put this in every deck and be happy with it, whether I have other energy sources or not. And it does get better with other energy cards.
Yeah, and kind of cool too. These kind of cards get pretty decent in multiples. If you get 2 of them out, they're very hard to attack into as well. If you can put 4 power of first strike up, that can be pretty tough to break through. All right, so I'm going to go C+. You're going to go B- on Ether Chaser. Next is Chandra's Revolution, and this card's kind of nasty. It's 3 in a red for a sorcery. It's common. And it does 4 damage to target creature. Then it's got this extra text that's just mean. It's tap target land. That land doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. What kind of sick individual designed this card? Let me splash. Just let me splash. Leave me alone, Chandra's Revolution.
Card is good. 4 mana
Yeah,
to kill creatures that cost up to probably 5 and sometimes 6. But yeah, anything up to 4 pretty easily. And then knocking your opponent off curve or, as you mentioned, off color for a turn seems pretty good too.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. I just think that incidental land thing is going to come up more often than it seems. But of course, the primary function here is 4 mana, kill something. And it does a pretty good job of that, even if it is sorcery speed. I would assume that Chandra's Revolution is going to be a solid B in the format.
Yeah, I like Chandra's Revolution at B.
Destructive Tampering is a modal spell. It's 2 in a red for a sorcery. It's also common. It says choose 1. Destroy target artifact, which is pretty good. There's a lot of artifacts and specifically artifact creatures. So that's not bad, especially when you combine it with this other ability that it can do, which is creatures without flying can't block this turn. Now, those seem completely unrelated, but that's actually a strength of Destructive Tampering.
Yeah, it's 2 situational cards that are good in very different situations, which is kind of how you want your situational modal cards to work.
Right.
So I still think you have to be a somewhat aggressive deck before the second part kicks in, but the fact that you would play Destroy Target Artifact for 3 mana in a lot of decks means that it seems like the first copy of Destructive Tampering is going to be pretty solid.
Yeah, now the first question that came to mind is, does it skirt that line between being primarily a sideboard card and between being a card that we want to main deck? It feels like it's close. If I had to guess, I would say, though, it actually does, if you're looking to attack, fall on the main deck side.
Yeah, I agree. I think multiple copies aren't going to, get better, but
I think the second one's way worse than the first one.
Because both effects are not ones you want lots of. But the first one seems like it's going to be so good. I don't know. I still just have it at C, but
I do too. Yeah, Destructive Tampering gets a C. Embrawl Gear Smasher, 2 and a red for a 2/3 human warrior at common. And this one gives us a hint of some of the things that we can see. It has tap, sacrifice an artifact. In other words, just smash an artifact. And it does 2 damage to each opponent.
So this is a 3 mana 2/3, which is obviously just mediocre.
Yeah.
But in the late game, it puts your opponent on a fairly fast clock. This can take them from 8 life pretty easily if you've got like some servos or puzzle knots or implements lying around.
Right, and it also enables Revolt for no mana. If you have an artifact that you can smash with it. There are some of, like we mentioned when we went over the implements in the last segment, that the implements don't care how they ended up in the graveyard. As long as they went there from the battlefield, you get to draw a card. And Embrawl Gear Smasher is one way that you can change an implement from whatever it was going to do into 2 damage instead, plus a revolt trigger, or meeting the criteria for a revolt. This card doesn't seem to be the kind of card that's going to dominate, but my guess is that it's pretty decent, and that as long as you're heavy into artifacts, you're going to have a lot of things to smash. And 2 damage does add up. Also, we should note here, Luis, that it does say to each opponent, meaning that if you're playing in a 2-headed giant event, it will end up doing 4 to your opponent.
I suppose that is relevant, though it is not going to affect our grade.
No, just something worth noting.
I think this is more of an aggressive card than it is a revolt card. I'm really still not in for playing cards like this just because you want to enable revolt. It feels like most decks are just not going to be going down that path. But in a beatdown deck that has artifacts, this seems like a good enough finisher.
Yeah, it does to me too. I'm going to give it a C+ just because it has just enough going on that I think that maybe it could end up being a piece of the puzzle for a heavy artifact deck. But it's right in that middle range for me.
I like it more at C, but sure.
Okay, so C for you for Emberall Gear Smasher. I give it a C+. What does Enraged Giant do?
There's a 5 and a red for a 4/4 Improvise Trample Haste at Uncommon.
Oh, I like it.
Yeah, 5 mana for a 4/4 Trample Haste would be good, and this is 6 mana, but obviously you're going to be able to cast it for 5 or 4 a decent amount of the time.
Right, and once you get to 4, you're talking serious power.
Yes, if you can cast this not only on turn 4, because that's clearly very good, but even just casting it for 3 or 4 mana later in the game means you can play 2 spells on turn 6 or 7. So that Improvise doesn't, it doesn't just have to curve out. So I like Enraged Giant. I don't know how often the red decks will be heavy artifacts, but Enraged Giant looks like it's pretty good in any deck with just a couple artifacts.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And particularly good in a deck with some artifact creatures where you can take a turn to tap those creatures to cast the Enraged Giant and still get a nice attack in with a 4/4 with haste. I like it. I don't know. Is it going to be a B-?
I would say it's a B-, yeah.
Probably is, right? I mean, the times when you do get to cast this thing on, like we said, turn 4, that's gross. That is a huge amount of pressure. And there's, especially if you're on the play, there's very few decks that can mount a defense that's reasonable for an Enraged Giant for the next, another couple of turns away. So yeah, I like Enraged Giant at a B-. What about Frontline Rebel?
2 and a red, 3/3 Human Warrior, and it must attack. So
must it?
Well, if able.
Yeah, that's true.
3 mana 3/3 is just a good deal. It's nothing like insane. It's just good. And attacks each combat if able part is a significant drawback if you're not aggressive. And even when you are aggressive, sometimes they'll have a 3/4 and it'll suck to attack with this. So I think it's a playable card in aggro, and I would not play it outside of aggro. And it looks like it's decent enough in those decks. It does make combat tricks better because you're forced to attack. Your opponent's less likely to suspect a combat trick.
Yeah, they're much more likely to block with even a creature that they wouldn't necessarily want to block with. But like you said, they're like, well, you've got to attack, so I have to assume that you don't have anything. And they can't just keep taking 3. I mean, a 3/3 for 3, those stats are nice. That is very good. And you do get to block with it once. Don't forget that. For the purposes of curving out and winning a race, having a 3/3 on your third turn to block their 2-drop or even 3-drop is pretty decent too. So on curve, Frontline Rebel looks pretty sweet. Off curve, it starts to get much worse. Late game, it gets much worse. And like you said, in a deck with that's not planning on beating down consistently, it gets much, much worse as well. I would guess that it's probably a C- for Frontline Rebel.
Well, I give it C- as well.
It's a serious drawback having to attack each turn.
It is.
Yeah. Gremlin Infestation, 3 and a red for an enchantment aura. It's uncommon. It enchants an artifact. So you must have an artifact on the battlefield to do. Now it says at the beginning of your end step, Gremlin Infestation deals 2 damage to enchanted artifacts controller. So they must have an artifact is how things are shaping up. When enchanted artifact is put into a graveyard, you get a 2/2 red gremlin creature token. Weirdly worded here, Luis. It says create a 2/2 red gremlin creature token. I'm assuming we get that, right?
Yes.
That's what we should assume. Even though normally the wording would be a little longer, maybe they ran out of room on the card. I've never seen it worded like that, have I?
Create is just a new template for...
Oh, for you get a?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It happened, I think, last set, actually.
Really? God, I just must have missed it. All right.
Yeah, you probably didn't think about it. That means it's a good word.
Yes, I agree.
You should know what it means.
Yes.
One thing I'd skip back to Frontline Rebel for just a second. You can crew vehicles with it to prevent it from attacking, which actually is kind of relevant. Point.
Does that bump it up to C?
No, I don't think so, but I think it's worth mentioning.
Okay.
Maybe in some decks it does, but
okay. Good point. Yeah, that's a really good point. So the infestation. This seems bad.
Bad? No, I think this card's quite good.
But you can't put it in your deck because you don't know if your opponent's going to have enough artifacts for you to enchant.
It feels like enough decks are going to have an artifact. And
dude, what are you, some sick gambler or something? I mean, if you like, if this thing's in your hand, it's really bad.
Yes, but it's like main decking an artifact removal spell, which you will most of the time.
Yeah, I don't know, man. This thing makes me really like. I don't think I would main deck Shatter, for example.
Really, I think I probably would.
I mean, the thing is that my criteria is I want to see a good target. Like, just finding a target for my Shatter is not good enough. Like, if I hit a servo token or implement.
Gremlin Infestation doesn't need to see a good target. You can put it on their servo and just whack them for 2 every turn until they kill it, at which point you get a 2/2 Gremlin.
Yes, that is true. So, but I mean, we were kind of, diverge. What I'm saying is like, this one has a lower bar. You are totally correct about that. But the bar is still there. Like, if they don't create an artifact of some sort, you're sitting there staring at your Goblin Infestation. It's pretty bad for you. I'm not loving the 2/2 either at the point of which you get it, which is going to be turn 5-ish if you play this thing on turn 4 and your opponent has a way to, get rid of their own artifact right away.
I think this card is good in an aggressive deck, even if, the situations that you're describing can happen.
Okay, we are going to be, there is going to be a gap.
Well, I'm not claiming this card is great, but I think it's playable.
Okay, I think it's, I almost want to give it a sideboard grade or something. Like, there's no way I want to main deck this card without knowing at least some of what's going on in my opponent's deck.
I think I would main deck this in an aggressive deck.
Okay, so I want to give it a D-.
Okay, I'm probably going to give it like
a C?
C-.
I'm
not in love with this card. But
no, I understand.
I think it's playable.
Okay, and I think it's like not, or maybe barely. Like, honestly, like I said, I just want to give it a sideboard grade because I do think if you see, oh no, my opponent's playing quite a few artifacts, then I think I probably want to have a copy of this floating around, no problem. But just as like a main deck, not non-sideboard card, I'm like, I don't think I would main deck it. I think I just bring it in. Maybe I give it a sideboard grade. I don't know. I don't really know how to grade that card, but I don't like it. Next, Hungry Flames. This card I like a lot. This is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. This is going to be one of the premium uncommons for red for sure. It does 3 damage to target creature and 2 damage to target player. Ouch.
Oh, so you like this card a lot because it's just a great card.
Yes. Yeah.
2 and a red instant deal 3 to a creature is just a very playable card.
Yes.
Add a shock to the face, and you just have a good card. I mean, Hungry Flames is just a B, right?
Yeah, it's just a B. Exactly. It's just exactly the definition of a B. It's a type of card that brings you into color. It's worth splashing for if you need to. Big fan. Invigorated Rampage, another modal spell. This is 1 and a red for an instant. It's uncommon. It says choose one. Target creature gets +4/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. Or 2 target creatures each get +2/+0 and gain trample until end of turn.
So it's like kind of a modal spell, but both modes are very, very close to each other. It's just 4 points of stats, and you want to split up, those 2 and 2 or 4 and 0. The thing is, the second one actually gets a little bit more value because you're giving double trample. You're giving 2 things trample instead of just 1 thing.
Right.
This is just a straight up damage spell because if you're using it to trade in combat, you're down a card, but mostly it's just like, will this deal 6 extra damage? Will it do 7 extra damage, 8 extra damage? It can do those things, I think, fairly easily. Making it a pretty potent aggressive card.
Yeah, I do too. The thing is, I normally don't like cards like this that don't help you win combat. You're still trading if you're trading, even if it lets you trade up because you're effectively 2-for-1-ing yourself. But man, it does feel like Invigorated Rampage has the ability to push through so much damage that it could be worth it. It's just like you said, if they're like, if you're aggressive deck and they're like chump block or, throw a couple of blockers in front of your big creatures and you just play this, they're just like, oh, I went from taking 4 to taking 12 or 9 or 7, like you can get through so much extra damage with this type of card if you have the big bodies. My guess is that this is going to be paired best in the green-red deck.
I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's good on vehicles too. If you have like the non-trampling vehicles, like the 6/6 for 4, you just rampage it up and just smash for 1 million. So we're seeing a very common theme, which is like, this is good in a beatdown deck. You're certainly not playing this in anything but an aggressive deck. But in an aggressive deck, this looks, I want to say C+.
Yeah, I would. I mean, you know me. I'm going to give it a C-. I just don't want to qualify it as much as you do and say, well, I don't want to put so many like, well, only in aggressive decks and that kind of stuff. Like, what grade do you give this in a vacuum? Like, it's a combat trick that any deck could play.
Yeah, this is closer to Lava Axe than Giant Growth. This is damage to the face.
Right.
And I think in an aggressive deck, it's a C+. Overall, maybe it's a C- because a lot of decks won't want it. But
yeah.
These sets these days have so many playables that you don't need to like take cards like this and try and play them in the decks they don't belong.
Yeah, I agree. Lots of damage though. You could definitely use it. All right, Lothnu Sailback is 4 and a red for a 5/4. That's all you're getting out of me.
Yeah.
Whatever. It's a C- or something.
I actually think it's a C because red doesn't get a ton of creatures of this size, but yeah, it's fine.
All right, you talked me into it. It's a C.
All right, there we go.
What about Precise Strike?
This is red for an instant, and it gives a creature +1/+0 and first strike until end of turn.
We've seen this card before, right?
Kindled Fury. I believe
yeah, Kindled Fury, exactly.
Yeah, this card is good. I mean, it's a combat trick. This is the C- of combat tricks that you like to dole out, I guess.
I don't like it. It's just my job, Luis. But this card actually does help you win combat, which I do like about it. Obviously, its upper potential isn't nearly as high as a card we talked about a minute ago. But Precise Strike is I would give it a D+. I think it's a moderate playable that sometimes makes the cut in your deck and oftentimes don't.
Yeah, I like it at C- just because I think it's going to win combats for 1 mana often enough, but I don't love the card.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Look. The way I look at it is, think about the draft decks that you end up with, right? The actual decks that you get. Well, not you. It was the rhetorical kind of bigger picture you. You just so rarely need to go and run these mediocre combat tricks like this one. This one's just okay, right? Like this one, I think is worse than basically all of the combat tricks from Kaladesh, for example. Maybe ornamental, whatever courage is worse
I like
or something.
A little bit more ornamental courage.
Me too. But like, if you look at build to smash, build to last, my favorite card, Blossoming Defense. All of those cards are just better than this. So, and those are cards that you play in an aggressive deck, and you're fine with them. So, I don't know. I like I said, D+ for me, C- for you for Precise Strike. What about Ravenous Intruder?
This is Atog. This is 1 in a red for 2 uncommon gremlin. Sacrifice an artifact. Ravenous Intruder gets +2/+2 until end of turn.
This is actual functional reprint of Atog, isn't it?
It's a shame they couldn't just reprint Atog, but I guess gremlins are the thing now. I don't think you're going to play this very often because you need a really reliable source of fodder, and even then, this isn't like insane. This is more of a, I guess, constructed level card, though Atog hasn't seen much play recently either. So
true. Yeah, I don't know. I agree with you. One thing it does do, it does get your revolt going if you have an artifact, again, for no mana. That can come up occasionally. You do have threat of activation, but it suffers from the same thing that the black artifact or the black activated ability artifact we talked about earlier is that if your opponent simply says, okay, fine, I won't block because you can threaten to activate this, and then you don't activate it, all you've done is attacked for a damage. And you need to be able to threaten killing them. Like, you need to be able to be like, attack, you're at 7. I have 3 artifacts. Now you must block, right? And you have to do something about this. And that can be powerful. But here, I don't know. I just get the vibe that, like, we need more things to throw at it than I've seen so far, at least from what I've seen of the set, to make this card really good.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem is that when you attack with this, your opponent's just going to take it, and you're just going to be like, well, I don't really want to sack artifacts to deal 2, and you're just taking 1. So that doesn't sound great to me.
No, it doesn't to me either.
I think this is probably like a D-.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it a D. It's Atog. I can't go that low on it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, if it had the other artwork, I would give it an A. But Reckless Racer, 2 and a red for a human pilot. It's a 2/3 at uncommon with first strike. Okay. 2 powered first strike, sure, we'll take it. Whenever it becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So you can crew stuff or attack and loot. That's great.
And it's a 2/3 first strike for 3, which is pretty hard to take down in combat. They need a 3/3 does it, but 2 2/2s does not do it. So
that's right. And one thing that I noted here that I'm noticing here, Luis, going back to Invigorated Rampage, the +4/+0 and trample or 2 different creatures, is that we've already got Ether Chaser at common that has first strike built in, and now we've got Reckless Racer at uncommon that also has first strike built in, which plays nice with a spell like that. So that just, keep that in the back of your head. That Invigorated Rampage may be going up a little bit depending on what's around it. Yeah. I like this card a lot.
The rummaging ability is pretty nice too. The discard and then draw.
Yeah, and it's a May.
Yep.
So if you've got the perfect hand, and by the way, it is okay to not rummage occasionally. It is not okay to not loot in most scenarios, but rummaging is a much different beast.
Yeah, you do have to evaluate the worst card in your hand. Is that better than the average card left in your deck? But for the most part, you'll be rummaging away excess lands or whatever weak spell you have.
Yeah.
Reckless Racer seems like a C+ to me.
I got it a B-.
You got a B-? Oh,
yeah, I like the rummage a lot. I think you can really work with that. Yeah, I like Reckless Racer. All right, this next one's pretty sweet too. Scrapper Champion.
This is 3 in a red for a 2/2. Human Artificer at uncommon. Has double strike. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. When it attacks, you can pay 2 energy to put a +1/+1 counter on it. So it's essentially a thriving creature.
Yes.
It's 4 mana 2/2 double strike, which attacks as a 3/3 double strike. This is 4 mana for a 6/3. 3 of which has first strike.
Yes, and again, now we go back to the Invigorated Rampage again. That thing's just with a bullet getting better and better. Scrapper Champion Invigorated Rampage game. This card's great.
That is 14 damage. Scrapper Champion is incredibly good. By itself, it's absurd. 3/3 double strike for 4 mana.
Yeah.
And when you have other energy cards and this becomes like a 4/4 or a 5/5, it just becomes completely unstoppable. So, yeah. The question is this a B+ or like an A-? I actually might think this is an A-.
God, I don't know.
3/3 double strike for 4 mana.
God, that's so good. I know. And it has the potential to get bigger.
Yeah.
I'm going to go B+. I'm just going with my gut.
All right.
I have no explanation for it, but Scrapper Champion is fantastic.
A-, B+.
Also, welcome back, Double Strike.
Yeah, I guess it's been a while, right?
Yeah, there wasn't any in the last set.
Uncaged Fury was in Eldritch Moon.
Yes, but not in Kaladesh. Yeah, it's been months since I've double struck.
Sure.
I'm welcome to have it back. All right. Now the anti-Scrapper Champion. Shock. It's funny.
Deals too.
Yeah, it's funny because, what we'll often do is, hey, what's the shock in this format? It's like, well, it's shock. It's just, all right. That makes it easy. This is, of course, the fixed lightning bolt from Days of Yore, and it still pops up occasionally. This card is excellent against aggressive decks. Oftentimes against flyers because they sometimes have lower toughness. It does wane a little bit in the later part of the game where it often is just going to hit a player for a couple of damage, but even then at least it has utility. Shock's great. It's just a rock solid little card. You're getting your mana worth. Just don't mistake it for, unconditional removal. It's not that. It hits a certain subsection of creatures, but it does it in the most efficient way you can. Instant speed, only 1 mana.
You always take this early and you always play it.
Yes.
Whether that makes it I think it's just a solid B.
I do too. I think Shock's a B.
Trade up on mana. You're going to kill a 3-drop with it a decent amount of the time.
Totally. And even if you only kill a 2-drop with it, it's good. Also, it's nice to be able to leave that up for combat trick prevention and just little stuff like that. Also, sometimes you just finish your opponent off with it. It's just a good, flexible little card. I give Shock a B. Next is Siege Modification. We referenced it earlier. It was also our other preview card. For LR, it's 1 red for an aura. It enchants a creature or a vehicle. If it was a vehicle, it becomes a creature in addition to its other types, meaning, of course, you do not have to crew it anymore. And the creature gets +3/+0 and first strike. And it just stays there. It just makes it big and stays there. This card's very powerful. We talked about it last week, but the Siege Modification is the type of card that I generally shy away from. I try not to play decks and cards like this because they're so all in that if your opponent has the answer, you're often so far behind that you can't recover That said, Siege Modification does push the boundary on this and becomes a very powerful card, especially on a vehicle.
I think Siege Modification is a pretty feast or famine card where like it's either going to be insanely good or insanely terrible, and that is, I guess, what a lot of auras are like.
And you mean that on a case by case basis, right?
Yes. I mean, like, some games this card will be unbeatable. You're going to play against, like, red-green that doesn't have a way to kill your 4/4. All of a sudden it's a 7/4 first strike, and they can never beat it in combat. Or you're going to put this on a creature, and it's going to get selected for inspection because it's got clearly illegal modifications. So
it certainly has that. I mean, the thing looks like a tank now or something.
Yeah. I mean, where this lands is probably, like... It probably lands at C. It's just some decks will want it if they're really aggressive and have a couple vehicles, and then most decks will just not.
Yeah, I like C for this, and that's generous. Normally I would give a card an aura like this, a D or something like that, but I think this one does hit really hard. Remembering, of course, that like you can play it on a vehicle, attack with that vehicle, plus the other things that your opponent probably thought were going to crew the vehicle and smash them for a huge chunk of damage. Now, I'm not of the opinion that if you play Siege Modification and get one hit in, it was worth it. I wouldn't play a card like that if that's all it did. But it is a consideration when you grade it to say, well, if that's its floor, it's not the all-time. It's not like it did 0, right? It was responsible for a big hit of damage. It does not grant any evasion, not even trample. So, if you put it on something that doesn't have trample or flying or something like that, they can go, okay, I'll block with my servo. Untap, kill the creature or kill the vehicle, which is now a creature and now susceptible to sorcery speed removal even. And then boom, you got blown out. So, it makes it so the creature can't be blocked profitably, but it can still be blocked. And so that can buy them some time with some servos laying around or whatever to find an answer in 2-for-1 a little bit later down the road. So I'm not in love with it, but it does hit really, really hard, again, especially if you throw it on a vehicle with any type of like trample or anything like that. Next is Sweatworks Brawler. This one was one of the examples for the mechanics. It's 3 and a red for a 3/3 human artificer at common, and it's got Improvise and Menace.
Pretty solid. I think you'd play this card even without Improvise a decent amount of the time.
Yeah, I think so too.
And with Improvise, it means it can come out on like turn 3 or just come out at a discount later.
Yeah, I think that's actually good. Me too.
Very solid card. Probably just give it a C+ though.
I would too. I'd give it a C+. I think it's just solid. I like a turn 3. It's a very good play. And like you said, if it's turn 6 and you play this plus a 4-drop or something, that's really good too. So Brawler C+. Wrangle. Looks like the artwork is doing not a good job. Or is he letting it free or is he wrangling it?
I think he wrangled it and is letting it loose on some.
The old Gremlin catch and release program. All right. Well, what does Wrangle do?
It's 1 and a red for a sorcery. Gain control of target creature with power 4 or less until end of turn. Untap it and gains haste. So this is a threaten, as they're called after, I think, the original one. Yeah. It's actually saving you points of mana in a way that I don't like because, first of all, threatens don't. It doesn't matter too much whether they cost 2, 3, or 4 because you're not playing them until the late game anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah.
Second of all, stealing creatures with power 4 or less means you can't steal a truly gigantic creatures, which is kind of what you want. So this is a cute card. Like I understand it's like, a new take on Threaten, but I'm just not going to put Wrangle in my deck. Even the aggressive decks, it doesn't seem that good.
No, I agree. I think you broke it down perfectly as well. It's tempting because it looks cheaper, but that's actually worse. It's just, it actually just makes the card worse. I would give Wrangle a D-. Like it's not stone unplayable, but it's about as low as it gets.
I would give Wrangle, I think, a D- as well. I was trying to decide if it might just be an F. I don't know.
It might be, but
I'll give it a D-. So maybe you'll Wrangle every now and then. It's a funny card, and plus I like the name Wrangle.
Yeah, I do too. I don't know why. All right, that's it for red. Clearly aggressive. My goodness, red is aggressive in this format. The combat tricks plus the double strike guy, the first strike guy, the menace guy. It's obvious that R&D wanted us to turn these red creatures sideways. So the question just becomes, what do we pair it with? So we'll keep an eye on that as we move into the new format. White comes to mind, but maybe there's others. Which of course brings us now to green. Ether Herder is our first green card. It's 3 and a green for an Elf Artificer Druid. At common, it's a 3/3. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy. And whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 energy. If you do, you get a servo. So we have the green version of this cycle. It's not super exciting. It's a Hill Giant, a 3/3 for 4 mana, which is like, on the vanilla test, I guess you would say it passes, but it's scraped by. You do get a couple of energy out of the deal and the ability to spend that energy. Though I gotta say, you're attacking with it on turn 5. If you have a good attack, yes, you can make the servo, which is a good thing. But getting that servo out on turn 5 is not super exciting. Like, it's likely to be outclassed on the ground, never really be able to attack or block profitably. So you need other things to do with it. I'm not in love with Ether Herder.
I think Ether Herder is fine. You're going to be able to attack with it almost every time just because it's a 3/3 that's just going to at least trade. And you get a servo out of the deal. I have it at C.
Yeah, I guess it's a C. It's just kind of boring.
Not going to be lower than that.
No. Ether Storm Leopard is next. It's 2 and a green for a 2/3 with trample. It's a cat. And when it enters the battlefield, you get an energy, just single. And whenever it attacks, you can pay an energy. And if you do, it gets +2/+0 until end of turn.
Ether Stream Leopard is pretty good. It's like a smaller version of Riparian Tiger, I guess, is the joke.
Yes, or it's like a more expensive Voltaic Brawler.
Sure. The fact that it attacks as a 4/3 the first time, or whenever it is you deem to spend the 1 energy, makes me pretty happy putting this in an aggressive deck, and it's pretty mediocre in other decks just because it's just a 2/3 blocker for 3.
Yeah, it hits hard enough, I think, to justify. I mean, I think Ether Stream Leopard's probably a C as well.
Yeah.
I'm not blown away. Like, remember, at this point, a few months ago, Luis, you and I were like, whoa, Pima Outrider and the Rhino and stuff. We ranked the Rhino the highest out of the group right off the bat. And, now we're looking at Ether Herder and Ether Stream Leopard. These are a lot worse. So green may be tipping a dip down here a little bit. Now, this next card I like quite a bit. See how it fits in the format. It's called Druid of the Cowl. What does that one do?
1 and a green for a 1/3, and you can tap it for a green mana. It's an Elf Druid at common. Great card. 2 mana accelerants that also have like a decent body attached, like a 1/3 is pretty good. That's
I like that.
Block, and it can gang up on blocks later in the game and accelerates you to 4. So I think Druid of the Cowl is like a pretty solid C+.
Yeah, I do too. I just think this is a type of card also that fills a role that it's the only one that's going to do that. A mana ramp on turn 3 or on turn 2 to ramp you out to turn 4 4 mana the next turn. And, it's not really replaceable. I like C+ for Druid of the Cowl. Hidden Herbalists is 1 and a green for a 2/2 human druid. It is uncommon and it's got Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, you get 2 green mana. It's free, kind of.
Yeah, it is.
That's not happening in limited very, very often, is it?
Well,
just give it to me straight, Luis. Don't lie to me. Don't sugarcoat it. Just tell me what I'm getting here.
You're mostly getting a Grizzly Bear, a 2 mana 2/2.
That's what I thought.
Sometimes you'll be able to play this free, but most of the time that's going to be late enough that it doesn't matter that much because it's just a random 2/2. So, I mean, if you want to 2-drop this card, is fine, but don't expect this to be some sort of like sick Burning Tree Emissary card.
Yeah.
I'd probably give it a C-.
C-, right? It's still a bear.
Still 2 mana 2/2.
Yeah, with a little bit of upside. I like this next combat trick, Highspire Infusion. 1 and a green for an instant. It's common. It says target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, and you get 2 energy.
I mean,
what's not to like?
Energy and combat tricks don't go together all that well, but you are going to have decks that want both these things.
Yeah. We've seen Ether Herder and Ether Stream Leopard. Both of them can use the energy. Unfortunately, like you point out, it's a little awkward because you're probably already in combat, so you can't use that energy right away unless you want to fire off your Highspire Infusion pre-combat, which is awkward. But I like +3/+3. That wins basically any combat. I mean, any green creature that's blocking or getting blocked is going to run over whatever is on the other side with the help of Highspire Infusion. And even though it's not 1 mana, but 2, that is still in the zone for me to be pretty happy for such a big effect. I mean, all of this is still medium, right? Like this is not a premium card in the set or anything like that. But as combat tricks go, I think this is worth the 2 mana.
It's the sort of thing that in the decks that want both, I think you're going to be pretty happy with it. And if you're only playing the +3/+3 side, it's still passable. So yeah, it's just like a Giant Growth with upside. Well, I'm trying to decide whether it goes. I still think it's just a C though.
Yeah, I have it at C- because on principle I can't somehow I can't ever grade a combat trick higher than you.
That's fair, I guess.
Yeah, but it's a fine card. I think it'll make the cut a decent percentage of the time and win you a lot of combats. Lifecraft Awakening. This card's a little weird, but it's pretty cool. It's green X. So we've got an X spell. It's uncommon. It's an instant. So an instant speed X spell. Put X +1/+1 counters on target artifact you control. If it isn't a creature or vehicle, it becomes a 0/0 construct artifact creature. Weird.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
This card is good because, first of all, you can use it in combat. It's an instant. So let's say you attack with a 2/3 artifact creature, and then they block with their 3/3, and you like Lifecraft Awakening, spending 4 mana. All of a sudden, you end up at the end of the day with a 5/6, and you traded 1 for 1.
Mm-hmm. That's pretty good.
That's a very good deal. And then later, you can just play this as like a 5 mana 4/4 or a 6 mana 5/5 at instant speed if you have some random non-creature artifact to wake up. Plus, it wakes up your vehicles too.
Yeah, it does, and when they're awake, boy, they're ready to go.
Yes. So if you put this on a vehicle, it'll be an XX, but then if you crew it, it'll be the base power and toughness plus that many ++1 counters.
Yeah, it'll be a 0/0. It becomes a 0/0 construct artifact creature, but if you crew it, I'm assuming that the base power and toughness take over. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
I believe that's true.
I believe so too. Yeah, we'll find out soon. Of note, it is target artifact you control. So if you do not have an artifact, you cannot play Lifecraft Awakening. And that is a drawback. So make sure that when you draft this card, you have enough incidental artifacts. It doesn't matter whether it's an artifact creature or just a random, whatever, an implement laying around or anything. But you do need to have a target. So make sure you have critical mass before you put it in your deck. But I think if you do, which I don't think will be hard, Lifecraft Awakening looks pretty strong to me. That making your creature big like that is and it sticks around is pretty sweet.
I'm not sure where this lands though.
I don't know either.
I think it's a B-.
You think it's that good, huh? Yeah, it probably is. It makes
just the fact that you're going to often trade this for a card and end up with just like a gigantic creature.
Yeah,
makes me feel like this card has legs.
I agree.
Or gives things legs.
Yeah, it definitely does that. One simple play is your opponent goes go. You've got 5 mana or whatever, and you go tap out for Lifecraft Awakening on end step. Wake up my, whatever it is, and now on your turn you've got a 5/5 that they didn't know was coming. Right? It's like, well, that changes everything, and that's, that's even not a great case scenario like the ones that you described where you're getting them in combat. So, all right, B- for Lifecraft Awakening. Lifecraft Cavalry, however, is a common, not an uncommon. It's 4 and a green for a 4/4 elf warrior with trample, and it's got Revolt. Lifecraft Cavalry enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it if a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn. So, at common, we have the opportunity here for a 6/6 trample for 5 mana. I like that.
It's a Riparian Tiger, but always.
But always, right. It just stays that way. And it's also one, if you don't get that Revolt trigger, right. It's a 4/4.
This card seems pretty good to me.
Yeah.
The thing with like expensive Revolt cards is you don't need to worry about like having them on curve as much because by the time you can cast this, combat's more likely to happen. Whereas something like Hidden Herbalists, which really needs to be played on like turn 2 or 3 to have real punch. The Cavalry, by the time it comes out, Revolt is just that much more like 5 mana 6/6 trample is very good, especially for common.
Yeah, I think so too. I think this card is solid. I think it's a C+. I still don't think it's in the B range, but the times when you do get to Revolt it's gross. And the times when you don't, it's solid enough.
Yeah, I think that sums up the card. I would. Well, my guess.
Are you willing to go into B range first?
No, my guess is this is just like I actually think it's just a C. I don't.
You're going down from where I'm at. Okay, just a C.
I don't think this is that special. Like Riparian Tiger ended up being just fine too.
No, Riparian Tiger was a C+. It was good.
I think it ended up being closer to a C.
Oh man. You didn't smash enough. All right.
There's just so many cards like this. So
that is true. The 5 mana slot is competitive. That is true. All right. Well, I'm C+, you're C on Lifecraft Cavalry. Lifecrafter's Gift. This is our third Lifecraft card in a row, by the way.
Yes.
This one's interesting. It's 3 and a green for an instant. It's uncommon. It says, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Then put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So you get a counter no matter what, and then you're going to get a second counter on that as well. So a creature that, your absolute bottom line scenario or worst case is you're paying 4 mana to put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature. And the upside is very high. This could be instant speed, put +1/+1 counter on each of my creatures or, most of my creatures or something like that. So the real question I have is how comfortable are you if it's 4 mana instant, put 2 +1/+1 counters on a creature? Like just in your worst case scenario.
Dragon Scale Boon.
Right.
It's okay.
That's
still okay. It's similar to Lifecrafter's Gift in that, or Lifecraft Awakening rather, in that you win a combat and have something to show for it afterwards. Mm-hmm. So 4 mana isn't cheap, but it's passable by itself. And then once you combine it with other +1/+1 counter things, and you're getting like 2 or 3 +1/+1 counters, that's different.
At instant speed, mind you.
Yeah.
I like the upside. I don't like the worst case. I wouldn't play that card very often. It's just okay. 4 mana is a lot to pay for that. But when you combine it with the potential to be ridiculous if you have the right +1/+1 counter deck going, I think Lifecrafter's Gift becomes one of your best cards in the right deck. I don't know what that deck looks like yet or how easy it is to get, but I definitely have my eye on this card. I'm going to give it a C+. I think it could easily be a B in the right deck.
I have it close. Yeah, I have it closer to C at C+ in the right deck.
Okay.
Which is funny because usually you're the one talking.
I know. Down. I have a feeling about this one that it's just going to be, there's going to be some times where it's like unreal. You're just like, oh my God, like combat looked pretty good. And now my whole team's dead or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. So where did you come down on it? Give me the gavel. C for Lifecrafter's Gift. All right.
Yes.
What about Malfist Revolutionary?
Whoa,
is he holding LSV's key?
He's holding something. Probably just like a blade of some kind. It's 1 green for a 3/3 human warrior uncommon. So 3 mana 3/3 has trample and enters the battlefield or dies. For each kind of counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter of that kind. So It doubles up on +1/+1 counters or energy, or adds an extra one of either of those. And
for everybody?
No, just for a target. So
for each kind of counter on target, permanent, or player. So you pick one thing.
Right.
Okay, gotcha. And it's a 3/3 with trample for 3 mana to start out with? Oh, yeah. I like that.
And then it does it when it leaves as well. Enters the battlefield or dies.
Or dies. Holy smokes.
Malfist Revolutionary seems quite good. You're often going to get 2 counters out of it. It's a 3/3 trample for 3 with upside. That sounds like a B to me.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. I definitely would put this at B. That is just a great card. Jeez. That looks pretty good in the +1/+1 counter deck too, if that ends up being a thing. Oh, this next card, man, this thing's a beating. Monstrous Onslaught. 3 green for a sorcery. It's uncommon, so you won't see too many of these. And you may be happy about that. Monstrous Onslaught deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control as you cast Monstrous Onslaught.
So that wording means that they can't disrupt it.
No blowouts.
As you cast, yeah. So you know how much damage you're getting as soon as you put this on the stack. That's also so you can target correctly and everything.
Okay, so I want you to tell me at what point this. So for 2, if it was 2 damage, that would be unacceptable, right?
Right.
3 probably as well. Now 4.
No, I think 3 would be playable.
3's okay. All right.
If this was 5 mana, deal 3 divided any way you choose, you would still put that card in your deck.
Okay, so what about 4?
Once you're at 4 or 5 or 6 damage, this card becomes absurd.
It's just a joke, right?
Yeah. It's just going to kill 2 or 3 creatures or 1 gigantic creature or sometimes more, depending on how much you can run up the score. And some of these green creatures get big.
Yes. I mean, we already talked about Lifecraft Cavalry occasionally being a 6/6 for 5. And like you said, I mean, if you get to Monstrous Onslaught for 6, it should be game over. You're killing 2 or 3 creatures or something huge. Look, the reason why I often don't love cards like this is because of the blowout potential, and they took that off the table. So now they've got me only worrying about having something relatively beefy on the table. And I think it's just well worth it to take that risk as long as you're playing a real green deck, which, I mean, you're playing a card that costs 3 GG, so you probably are. I'm in. I think Monstrous Onslaught's going to be a high pick, and I think it's going to be responsible for winning/losing a lot of games. I like it a lot. I'd give it a B.
I like B+ on Monstrous Onslaught.
You're an optimist.
Could actually see this getting an A-, by the way.
You what?
It's pretty close. It's pretty close to A-, I think.
No, come on. You still have to have a board.
You have to have one creature. And
you have to have one good. Like if you have a 3/3, I guess you were saying you'd still play it, like be pretty happy with it at 3/3.
At 3 damage, so I like Monstrous Onslaught.
I'm not in love with it at 3.
I'm still going to give it a B+.
That's the difference. But. Okay, yeah, I think so. I give it a B, but this card's a beating. Like, it's just a savage, nasty beating. Monstrous Onslaught's great. Narnum Renegade. Green, uncommon elf warrior. It's a 1/2 with Death Touch. I kind of like cards like that. Yeah, and it's also got Revolt. It enters a battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it if you've got Revolt going. I like it.
This card's pure upside. 1 mana, 1/2 Death Touch, already playable. And then if it can come in as a 2/3, first of all, 2/3 Death Touch is very hard to rumble with.
Oh, yeah.
Second, it only costs 1 mana, so you can just hold it until Revolt is on if you don't need to play it, which seems like it's fairly easy to do.
Oh, that's a great point. It might peck in for a damage or 2 early, but oftentimes they're going to play a 2-drop that you don't want to trade with it anyway. So waiting is a much easier cost. I like it. Narnum Renegade's sweet. It's probably a C+. Is it? Can it be a B-? I just don't know that I'm taking it that highly.
I like it at B-. I think this card's just going to be very good.
I mean, look at my Lifecrafter's gift up here. Just getting a little better, getting a little better. I'm still going to go C+ on it, but whatever. I'm taking it high. What does Natural Obsolescence do?
1 green instant. It's a common, and it puts target artifact on the bottom of its owner's library. So, it's a 2 mana, kill an artifact, which seems like a C- to me.
I would sideboard. I remain unconvinced.
It's weird because I think I'm at the point where I almost played like 1 Appetite for the Unnatural in my main deck.
I would too, but that did hit enchantments.
But I guess it's still just a sideboard. Sure, yeah, I guess this doesn't hit enchantments. That's a good point. All right, I'll give this like a C sideboard grade then. Yeah,
I would give it that too. It's fine. You'll be playing it in some games, but I don't think you'll be main decking it too often. Pima Aetherseer is 3 and a green for a 3/2 elf druid at uncommon. When Pima Aetherseer enters the battlefield, you get an amount of energy equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Okay. And you can pay 3 energy to have target creature block this turn if able.
So she comes in with 3 energy at the very least, assuming your opponent doesn't kill her in response to the trigger.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So you end up with...
Which matches up nicely with her activated ability.
And making a creature block, it's going to be
hard
to
How
set
good
that
is
up,
that? Mm-hmm.
But it is powerful. I mean, it does mean that sometimes they have a 3/3 and you have a 4/4 and you can just kill their creature, essentially.
Right. And it does get a little interesting, right? Because it only has to block something. So you have to be very careful about how you set that turn up. You want to attack with something bigger than it, and it must block it. But oftentimes they're still able to double block your creature or whatever. It's a little tricky to set up to make it great, but it can be very good.
My guess is it's still just a C, but it's an
I think so too. I just think it's tough to set up really great situations with Pima Aetherseer, but when you do, you'll be happy. Reprint time. Prey Upon is back. It's green sorcery. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control.
The classic fight card.
Depends heavily. Go ahead.
I was just going to say it's always been good, and every time it's shown up, but it's been better than others depending on the size of your green creatures, which is, I'm sure, what you were about to say.
That is what I was going to say. So I think these creatures look pretty big, and I think Prey Upon's going to be rock solid.
Yeah, I agree.
I give it a B-. I think it's going to be premium green removal. It's going to be...
It really does leverage your your random tigers and tuskers and life crafters or whatnot. So
right, and I love the fact that it's only 1 mana. I mean, it feels like cheating when you can play a creature, have it fight, and then attack with the ones that didn't fight into your opponent's stuff. It just feels like cheating. The reason I'm not going super high on this though is that it still is risky. This one can be interrupted quite nicely if your opponent has a bounce or kill spell in response to your prey upon. They can 2-for-1 you. So you have to be a little careful with it. But still, the fact that it only costs green really pumps it up for me. And I think that the green creatures in the set are going to complement it. So I'm going B-.
I'm going to give Prey Upon a C+, but I respect the B- grade. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being higher than I think.
All right. This one is going to be high no matter what. Ridge Scale Tusker. Read this one for us. What a card.
It's 3 green for a beast. It definitely is a beast. An uncommon. It's a 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. So it's 5 mana 5/5 that distributes a counter to every other creature you have.
That's stupid. What is that card doing here?
This card is just running over your opponent, I guess. I mean, it's 5 mana for like 8/8 worth of stats on a lot of boards.
That is unreal.
So, Ridge Scale Tusker, I think gets a B+ from me.
It's Verdurous Gearhulk, right? That's what it is. It's just a...
Yeah, I guess it's not quite there, but it's pretty close.
But it's like in the ballpark on some boards.
Yes.
It's unreal. This card's great. What did you end up giving it? An A-?
B+.
I'm going to go A-.
All right.
I just think it's going to be responsible for winning so many games. What a stupid card. It's just absurd. It comes down on turn 5. It's like the perfect curve topper. Love it. Love Ridge Scale Tusker. Scrounging Bandar is next. That's right. We've got a cat monkey back in the house. 1 and a green for Scrounging Bandar is a 0/0. It says it enters a battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. So we'll take note of that. We've seen a few cards that care about +1/+1 counters, and this one comes built in. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of +1/+1 counters from Scrounging Bandar onto another target creature. What do we like?
Well, this card is very good because it's a 2 mana 2/2 that has decent upside in the late game.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and it has counters.
it has counters for all those various counter synergies.
Right.
I mean, it's not insane, but I think Scrounging Bandar is just going to be a good addition to most green decks. I would give it a C+.
I would too. And like you said, its baseline is still just a bear. It's just much better than a bear. I think Scrounging Bandar is really good.
A lot more flexibility on where the stats go.
Totally. Yeah, I like that a lot. Silkweaver Elite is 2 and a green for a 2/2 elf archer. It's got reach. It's a spider smasher. It says when Silkweaver Elite enters a battlefield, this is for Revolt. If a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, draw a card. Oh yeah.
2/2 reach is not
2/2 reach sucks, doesn't it?
Common of numbers, no, because it's just not going to block all that well.
It can trade, and that's okay, I guess, especially if you're drawing a card. But
the fact that it draws you a card is pretty nice. I'm still not really in love with this card. It just doesn't do either half all that well. I think I would give it a C-.
I would too. If Revolt ends up being significantly easier than we think it will be to trigger, then this card goes up a bit. But it just feels like Revolt, you kind of have to work for it. And this is a payoff, but it's not a great one. Unbridled Growth. This card is weird and cool, and I think kind of good. It's green for an enchantment aura. It enchants a land. This is common. The enchanted land has tap, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Now, we'll note here that it just changes it so that it can tap for any color. It doesn't add an additional color. It's not a ramp spell. It's just fixing. It also has sacrifice Unbridled Growth, draw a card.
This card's kind of funny because...
Weird card, right?
When you need it, it does what you need it to do, and then you can cash it in later. I guess that's a good combination. I mean, that does sound like how you want your fixtures to be.
I mean, also it enchants a land, which is very difficult to interact with. It is green, draw a card. Fine. It also triggers Revolt.
Yes. It does enough different things. Basically, if you have Revolt or you're playing 3 colors, this card seems like it's quite good. If you're playing 2 colors, it still seems playable. So that kind of adds up to it's kind of weird. I want to give it a C+ because of how often you'll play it and how many different decks it goes in. but it's kind of like C power level because it's not like the card is awesome or anything.
Yeah, but this is the same conversation we could have had about Prophetic Prism.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that card.
Yeah, and this reminds me a lot of that, where it's doing a lot of the things that you want to do and giving you the card back while fixing your mana. It has just a lot of, it's just that, of course, only green gets access to it. I like it. I don't think I can bring myself to go B- on Unbridled Growth because its ceiling isn't that high, so I'm going to go C+, but I really think it's good.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. You'll allow me to indulge. All right, that's going to do it for green. Green looks beefy and big, and I think I like it a lot. Really keeping an eye on that +1/+1 counter thing, too. That really stood out to me. All right, that means that we're curving back over to white now, where we've got aerial modification. So let's see how this modification holds up. It's 4 and a white for an uncommon. It's an aura and enchants a creature or vehicle. It has that same thing that the siege modification has, where if the thing is a vehicle, it becomes a creature in addition to its other types. But this time, it gets +2/+2 and flying.
So it gives it evasion, but you're also paying kind of a premium. You're paying 5 mana for this effect.
5 mana?
Well, the good thing is, by the time you want this effect, spending your turn on it is not going to be as bad because you really just care about, smashing for a ton of damage here.
Yeah, I agree that that's what you care about if you put this in your deck. I don't know that I care to put this in my deck, though.
Well,
go ahead.
See, if you don't have any vehicles, this card does lose a lot of its luster. It's a 5 mana Spectral Flight. And that doesn't sound great. But if you do have vehicles, this can lead to some pretty large flying creatures because vehicles tend to be overstated for their cost.
It's true. God, I don't know. I'm going to start off low on this, on aerial modification, but I do leave the window open for me to get just smashed by this card enough times that I'm like, fine, you just got to play it. I agree with you though. It's all about vehicles. I just don't really want to play this on anything other than a vehicle unless I'm forced to.
You don't really want to be modifying your random 2/3. You want to modify your 6/6.
Yeah,
that tends to be vehicles.
The other thing that I think of when I think of aerial modification costing 5 is not just that it's more mana for you to pay, but it also gives your opponent a lot more time to have answers and more expensive answers. Some of the removal in the set cost 4 or 5 mana, where with siege modification, you get to hit them twice before they can play, their 5 mana removal spell, where aerial modification, they easily could be set up and maybe you get to hit them once. God, it's powerful though. I mean, that is so much damage.
And it is evasion, so
yes.
I still don't really like the card. I think it is powerful though. So
I'm trying my damnedest to respect it.
I guess I'm going to give it a C, but it really is just completely context dependent.
All right, I'm going D. I don't care. I'm going D. I don't like it. I'm off it. I'm going to lose to it. I'm going to be mad that a D smashed me so many times, but I'm just going to have faith in the magic gods that we have enough answers to aerial modification. Aeronaut Admiral is 3 and a white for a 3/1 flying human pilot at uncommon, and it says vehicles you control have flying. I don't like this that much, to be honest.
I think it's fine.
I do think it's fine.
Power.
Yes, I agree. The thing I don't like about it that much is that it has 1 toughness. So if they have effectively any flyer, then it doesn't interact well with it on blocking or attacking. Trading your 4 mana for any flyer is not great. The other thing that I don't love about it is that I think the vehicles you control have flying is a little overrated. Show me the vehicles that you want to play that are easy to block or interact with anyway. Part of
the strength of vehicles is that they are hard to deal with in combat. It's not
right.
They don't need more help once they're active. Cards like aerial modification activate them. Aeronaut Admiral kind of doesn't.
Right. That said, 3 power flyer for 4 mana with upside. Right? Even if it is just have the 1 toughness, but hey, I'll take the vehicles you control have flying for free, right? It's not like that's all you get with the card, is a decent beatdown card. The skies have to be clear for you, but if they are, you're hitting for 3. And, I said that the creatures don't, the vehicles don't interact can't be blocked easily, but they can be blocked. Like there's situations where they just do get blocked or where they get chump blocked or whatever, and the Admiral does take that away. So I don't think it's a bad card by any stretch. I just don't think it's amazing. I don't think this is like, super premium uncommon or anything. I think it's just a good card.
Yeah, my guess is it lands closer to like C plus though.
That's what I think too. I think it's a C plus, which I think is a good card. And if you have enough vehicles, maybe it does make it better. I don't know. I'm gonna go C plus.
It would make it better if you had more vehicles because then they don't have fun.
All right, thank you for that. I'm gonna go Aeronaut Admiral C plus. Ether Inspector is 3 and a white for a 2/3 Dwarf Artificer. It's common. It's got Vigilance, and here we have the one of that new cycle. So it gets 2 energy when it enters the battlefield, and whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 energy to make a servo. So
don't particularly like this one.
2/3 Vigilance for 4, a little too low on the old vanilla test for you.
The 2/3 just does not get to attack successfully, I think, all that often. So
I agree.
I guess his Ether Inspector just sits on the sideline. I would give it a D.
I would too. I just think the stats are too low for Ether Inspector. Airdrop Aeronauts. Stats just fine for this one. This one's 3 white for a 4/3 Flying Dwarf Scout at uncommon, and it's got Revolt. When it enters a battlefield, you gain 5 life.
Yeah, that is quite the Revolt trick.
Boom.
This is a flying Arborback Stomper.
I love this.
Yeah, the card is great.
This is...
the question is, would you give it a full B or are you giving it a B minus?
I'm giving it a full B. Easy. In fact, I might give it a B plus.
Not that far. I like Airdrop Aeronauts at B.
Okay. I'm also going to go B. But to me, it is between B plus and B, not B and B minus. 4/3 Flying for 5, I'm already like, yep, put that in my deck. And then randomly gaining 5 life it can be a huge swing in the right game. So B for Airdrop Aeronauts. Love it. Alley Evasion is white for an instant, and this is a modal combat trick. It's common. It says choose one. Target creature you control gets +1/+2 until end of turn. Or return target creature you control to its owner's hand. Kind of on that too. I'm not really in love with either of these abilities. Normally I lean on the fact that there's options to get me through it, like we talked about with the red one, but Alley Evasion is falling a little short for me here. Where are you at on it?
I like Alley Evasion. +1/+2 is a nice little set of stats to win most combats. And then if that doesn't work, you can return your own creature. So this feels like a combat trick that also does a very good job of playing around removal. It also like re-triggers Revolt. Like if you have a good Revolt creature, you can go bounce it for 1 mana, replay it. Revolt is on because
that's interesting.
Creature left.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
You're going to give it a C minus. I'm going to give it a C, and we can move on.
Done. Audacious Infiltrator, 1 and a white for a 3/1 Dwarf Rogue at common. It says Audacious Infiltrator can't be blocked by artifact creatures. And that is powerful here, because what's the first thing you think when you see a 2-mana 3/1 in this format? You're like, servos.
Yeah,
but no.
It does not have the normal drawback that a 2-mana 3/1 would have.
Right. I think it's fine.
And then they have a bigger artifact too, and it jumps past those as well.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's pretty good. If you're looking to beat down, I think you're going to play about as many Audacious Infiltrators as you can put in your deck.
Well, I think it's good in a beat down deck. I don't really like it outside of that. I think that leaves it at C minus for me.
Yeah, I'm just going to give it a C. I think in a beat down deck, it's like pretty darn good. Next card's easy. Bastion Enforcer is a 3-mana 3/2. It's a Dwarf Soldier at common.
That's just a classic D.
It's a D. Caught in the Brights. This is a nice one. Yeah, why don't you read this one?
Kill the card. It's
I know, it's so
2 and a white for an aura. It's uncommon.
No, it's common.
Or sorry, common.
Yeah, I like that.
Enchanted creature can't attack or block, and whenever a vehicle you control attacks, exile enchanted creature. So you run it over with a vehicle, and it's like a gremlin caught in.
You mean you run over the thing that you? It's like so mean.
Yeah. So it's an arrest, right, or a pacifism for 3 mana, which is already good. Revoke privileges, what have you.
Yep.
The fact that whenever you attack the vehicle, you exile it means it turns into actual hard removal in a deck with vehicles, and it's playable on a deck without them. This actually just looks like a B to me.
I think it's a solid B. I think this is going to be probably the best white common, though there's a few other contenders, but this is going to be, high on the list. This is, like you said, this is your revoked privileges for the set, and it's better, right? I mean, Like getting the card exiled at some point is nice because it means that they can't just bounce it or kill the Caught in the Brights later or that kind of thing. I like
and
it.
even against decks that have a lot of those effects, you just make sure you set up a turn where you play this and attack the vehicle in the same turn.
There you go. Yeah, and that and the truth is, even if it didn't have the vehicle clause, you'd still play this card every time. Conviction is next. It's 1 and a white for an enchantment aura. It's common. It enchants a creature. The creature gets +1/+3. Kind of interesting stat bump. And here's the trick. You can pay a white mana to return Conviction to its owner's hand, thus triggering Revolt. And also getting Conviction back to your hand. So that if your creature was going to die or whatever, you can put it on something else.
Yeah, I still really like the card. It's still just an aura, right? And even though you can return the aura to mitigate the effects of like removal, if you want to get the bonus in combat, you can't like trade off with this and then bounce it. You need to actually bounce it before damage.
Right. Do you consider this a primarily offensive or defensive card?
I think it's more of an offensive card.
Yeah, and then it's just not great, right? Because the +1 power isn't super great. The 3 toughness is a lot, but you're kind of hoping to. It's basically like an equipment, right? It has a similar feel to an equipment where you're paying some amount of mana to move it around to your creatures. It does have extra stuff going on, like I said, with Revolt and that kind of stuff. But I don't know how good this card's going to be. I could see it being very annoying. I could also see it just nobody playing it.
Conviction on it?
I do not. I do not at all. Do you have any idea? Like, what's your
I think the card is not
great
going to be good. I think like you're going to put it in Revolt decks and be like, well, this card's okay, but it's not a card I'm excited about in any way, shape.
Not either. How about a D for Conviction? Is that fine?
I like D for Conviction.
Okay. Countless Gears Renegade is 1 and a white for a 2/2 Dwarf Artificer. It's common, and it's got Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, you get a 1/1 colorless servo.
This is not much better than a 2-mana 2/2 because Revolt's not going to be on early unless you're really going out of your way, and later in the game, it's not that big of a deal. So it's a curve filler.
Yeah, to me, it just seems like a C.
Yeah.
All right. Dawnfeather Eagle. I like this one. It's 4 and a white for a 3/3 flying bird at common. And when it enters a battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain vigilance until end of turn. That's kind of a beating.
Oh, this card's great.
Yeah.
5-mana 3/3 flyer is already good, and especially at common. You don't get that many commons of that size. And then giving your whole squad +1/+1 vigilance. This card screams uncommon to me, but it is definitely a common.
Yeah, it does read like an uncommon, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to go B- on Dawnfeather Eagle. I'm going big.
All right. I like it at C+, but I could see getting to B-, yeah.
Yeah. All right, this next one I think you're going to bump up
trick,
a bit.
By the way. You play it, trigger on the stack, you crew a vehicle with it, and then it gets the +1/+1 and vigilance.
Oh, look at that. That's really nice. I like that. Yeah, that's really cool. Deadeye Harpooner is next. Oh, yeah. 2 and a white for a 2/2 Dwarf Warrior at uncommon. It's got Revolt. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target tapped creature an opponent controls.
This card's interesting because when it works, it's clearly awesome. It's just not going to work all that often. So as long as you know that, you can include it in your deck and not be too disappointed. It's just a 3-mana 2/2 that,
Well, that
every
sucks.
now and then pick something up. But for the most part, it is not going to actually happen because it has to meet multiple conditions, right? Revolt has to be on, and they have to have a tapped creature. So
yes, and you have to have the
mana. It's
mana.
pretty hard to jump all those hoops.
It really is. But the upside is very high. I mean, killing a creature is pretty unreal. I would expect that this is going to be the all-star of the Revolt deck, but like you said, if you're not specifically putting cards in your deck like Conviction, like the map, to trigger Revolt, it's going to underperform a bit because a 2/2 for 3 is not a thing that you'd want to play. Upside's there though, man. That is a beating.
Yeah. This is the kind of card that you want to build a Revolt deck around, but I'm not seeing enough cards to really go that deep on it. So that's where it leaves you in kind of a weird spot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
My guess is Deadeye Harpooner is just medium, but in the right deck, it becomes like medium plus.
It's also very I mean, I think it becomes like if you could get Revolt somewhat.
If it was just Revolt was automatically on, this card would be great.
It would be like a B, right? Maybe a B plus. But it's not. That is not the world we live in.
So that I guess leaves it like C plus maybe.
Yeah, I'm just going to go B- and assume that you're going to put at least some number of. You're going to either be patient and wait for Revolt, or you're going to stack your deck with in a way that makes Deadeye Harpooner, active as often as possible. That's what I'm just going to go with. If your deck can't get Revolt or very consistently, then the card plummets in value.
Yeah, I don't think that you're going to want to put this in a random deck and expect great things, but you can just play it and hope the situation comes.
What is your grade for it?
C plus.
Okay. I have to. I got to press you. I can't let you off the hook.
This is one of the cards where I think the grade is just not that useful.
I agree. I agree 100%.
That's why I keep going back and forth. I'm just looking at it. I'm just like, it's just gonna be. It's gonna fall somewhere in that range, and it's hard to. In a deck where it's built around, it's going to be a B. In a deck where it's not, it's going to be a C. So I guess I'm just going to give it a C plus.
I love that you called that out here, because this is exactly what we were talking about at the beginning of the show when we said, listen to what we say.
One of the cards that the grade, I think, is actively like...
It's just terrible. Yeah, so. I agree. Okay, next. We have to do it, and we got to put a stamp on it.
I guess you made me grade it. I didn't really want to.
I forced you to. Decommission. 2 and a white, instant, common. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, and it's got Revolt. You gain 3 life. I'm probably in for the first decommission main deck-ish.
This card is fine. The Revolt doesn't matter a whole lot.
No, but I like that it's an instant.
It's an instant, yeah. I guess I'm at C for decommission.
Sure, C is fine. Deft Dismissal is 3 and a white for an instant at uncommon. It says it deals 3 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 target attacking or blocking creatures. Is that Gideon? Yeah, it is.
I believe so. I do not like this card. I think it's a worse version of Impeccable Timing, and I did not like that card very much either. Okay. I get that you can divide this so you can kill a bunch of Thopters, like the card even suggests, but for the most part, I think this card is just going to be mediocre.
How mediocre? D? Are you ready to dismiss this as a D?
D plus. So basically, yes.
Are you right about that? You're probably right about that.
Just think about how bad Impeccable Timing was.
It was deeply medium, and Deft Dismissal is highly telegraphed.
Yes, it costs 4 mana instead of 2.
Yeah, you're right. I'm going to go D plus also on Deft Dismissal. I mean, it still has a relatively powerful effect, but talk to me a month into the format, and nobody's getting blown out by this card. Nobody. Yeah, I'm off it. Felidar Guardian is 3 and a white for a 1/4. Oh no, not this one. This is the scourge, potential scourge of standard. Yes. 3 and a white for a 1/4 cat beast at uncommon. It says, when it enters the battlefield, you may exile another target permanent you control, then return that card to the battlefield under its owner's control. The 4 mana 1/4 is the hard part, because I like the effect. I think the effect is something that you can often translate into some small to medium to sometimes even more bit of value. It's an immediate revolt enabler. You blink your Deadeye Harpooner and kill their guy or whatever. But the 4 mana 1/4 kind of has me a little confused. Do I like that? I think I do. I don't know.
I think this card's great.
Explain.
I think it's like actively good. 4 mana 1/4 is not like exciting, but it's real stats. Like this card will have an impact on the board.
Yes.
And then re-trigger and enter the battlefield effect, saving one of your creatures from
the headlights.
Some kind of negative aura. I think you're just gonna get like a solid half card out of this almost every time. And it auto, like if you target a revolt creature, it auto has revolt because it left. So I think that Felidar Guardian is actually a B.
Okay, I'm going to go B-, but I agree. I like I said, I just used Deadeye Harpooner as just a random example. You play it on turn 3, your opponent's like, sure, attack into it, like it's a stupid 2/2. You're like, no blocks. Turn 4, Felidar Guardian, kill your thing. Like that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean the card has a significant upside here.
Dawnfeather Eagle getting blinked. Countless Gears Renegade. Okay, yeah, I'm in. Yeah, every card I just read randomly on the page in front of me worked with Felidar Guardian.
Exactly.
Yeah, I like that. So all of the Enter the Battlefield Revolt cards just get to happen again. Yep. All right, I'm with you. B on Felidar Guardian. Ghirapur Osprey is 2 and a white for a 2/2 with flying. It's a bird.
Yep, that's what it is. It's a Windrake. It is better than Windrake because white is more aggressive than blue. I mean, I think we can just say that even
definitely
without having played this. So that makes this a C, even though Windrake ended up being closer to a D, I think.
It was definitely a D. I didn't even want it. 2 more white cards. Restoration Specialist. 1 and a white for a 2/1 Dwarf Artificer. It's uncommon. And you can pay a white and sacrifice the Specialist to return up to 1 target artifact card and up to 1 target enchantment card from your graveyard to your hand.
So one of the things I like about this card is that it's a 2-mana 2/1 in the games where you just draw it and play it on turn 2, and it's fine there, because that's what 2-drops are supposed to do. And then later in the game, you can cash this in for an artifact, and if you're lucky, also an enchantment, but mostly just an artifact. Mm-hmm. So I think that kind of checks the boxes I'm looking for when I look for 2-cost cards. Like,
I think so too.
I think that gets this up to a C+ for me.
I do too. There's also minor synergies with Revolt. You can sacrifice this and target nothing. It says up to 1 and up to 1. So if you just have to have Revolt right now, you can pay white and sack it.
True.
Okay. Yeah. C+ for Restoration Specialist. Last card, maybe the best one of the whole lot. It's Thopter Arrest. It's 2 and a white for an enchantment. It's uncommon. It says when it enters the battlefield, exile target artifact or creature an opponent controls until Thopter Arrest leaves the battlefield.
Yeah. So it's a Vanishing Light or Oblivion Ring for artifacts or creatures.
Which is what you're going to do most of the time.
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, this card's a B. It's just unconditional removal, and they can't even save their creature with, like, blink effects because it's exiled.
Yeah.
Like, they can in response, but, like, once this is in play, it's not vulnerable to, like, Aviary Mechanic and that sort of thing.
Exactly. I'm going to go B+ on Thopter Arrest. I like the fact that it can get vehicles, even though it's a sorcery.
That's fair.
That is something that has popped up numerous times where I'm, sitting there looking at my stupid revoke privileges, and I just know I can take out their enabler, but they're just going to play another creature and smash me with this stupid Renegade Freighter or whatever. Thopter Arrest just solves that problem outright. I like that a lot. So I'm going to go B+ on Thopter Arrest.
Sounds good. All
right, that does it for white, which moves us to blue, and then we've got black. That'll do it. Ether Swooper. Ether Swooper is 1 and a blue for a 1/2 with flying. It's a Vedalken Artificer at common. And this is part of that cycle that we kept referring to, the new, what is it called? Thriving. The new thriving type of cards, right? So you get the 2 energy, and when it attacks, you get the 1/1. 1/2 flying for 2. So obviously this one's the most likely to be able to make the servo, but it's also not a high impact card as just a 1/2 flying for 2 mana.
This is, I think, a good card. I actually like this quite a bit when I did the written, because it's 2 mana for a 1/2 flyer, which is almost always going to be able to get in there and make the servo. And I don't know, it's 2 mana for 2/3 worth of stats, even if it's split up and 1/2 of it has flying. That actually seems like quite a good deal to me.
When you put it that way, it is a little better. It's just both cards are so inconsequential.
Kind of, but like, first of all, they block well combined.
Yes.
Second of all, the 1/2 flyer can just keep pecking in there, and if you get more energy, you can just keep giving you servos, because it's going to be very hard for your opponent to stop you. Right?
You're just dropping servos from the sky.
Yes. I don't know. I like Ether Swooper. I think the card's going to play out pretty well.
You think it's a C?
I actually thought it was a C+.
Okay, I'm going to go C on Ether Swooper. I was actually going to give it a D. I was pretty low on it, but when you said that for the way that it blocks, you're right. That is true, and I think I was somehow framing it more into the glass of looking at it as an attacker, which I think it's not a very good, but it's blue. We're not really looking to beat down. So I'm going to go C on Ether Swooper. You're going to go C+. Bastion Inventor. This is 5 and a blue for Vedalken Artificer at common. It's a 4/4 with Improvise and Hexproof. That's good and annoying.
Oh, yeah.
I like it.
This card's going to play out quite well. Like the other Improvise cards, these cards are costed such that they're only like 1 mana more than I would expect to pay.
I agree.
Which means that often you're going to pay 1 or 2 mana less than you would expect to pay because you just have a couple artifacts. So I like Bastion Inventor. I actually like this at C+ as well.
I do too. This card just seems solid to me. Hexproof is very powerful ability, especially when you're looking to block. I mean, you don't want to get your blocker removed, and Bastion Inventor is a good blocker at 4/4 on the ground, and can't be taken out of the way. I like it. What about Dispersal Technician?
You like this one. This is a 4 and a blue for a 3/2. Vedalken Artificer at common. When it enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact to its owner's hand.
Man, they're really trying to they're trying to test my limits here with my Mana War love, because a 5 mana 3/2 that only bounces artifacts is definitely skirting the boundary there. That said, I find these effects just very powerful. We'll have to see how it plays out. The real key is that you're bouncing, like if you could bounce an artifact creature, turn this into a more of an actual Mana War type scenario. That's quite good. These effects are powerful, but this one's narrow, and the 2 toughness is a little concerning on a 5 mana creature. You're really not getting your mana's worth for the creature. It does need to hit something relevant. Here's a good baseline. If it kills a servo and you get your 5 mana 3/2, are you happy with that?
I think so.
It's like barely though, right?
Yeah, not by like tons, but yeah, I think that's good enough.
I do too. I want to give it a higher grade because I like this type of card, but my gut says it's a D+ or a C-. I
think it's a C. I think it's just a straight up C.
You're going to make me give it a lower grade than you? What is this?
Well, I just think you're going to bounce a 3 or 4 cost artifact enough of the time that this card's going to be good.
I'm going to give it a C.
All right.
You did it.
All right, I'm going to give it a C+.
We're turning it into a bidding war.
All right, C on Dispersal.
C on Dispersal. Now, this next card is a horrifically named card. It's called Efficient Construction, yet there's nothing efficient about it. It's 3 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact creature token with flying.
Well, there we go. I mean, I like this kind of build around. I mean, it's clearly a build around.
Oh, you love this kind of card, yeah.
I think this is a B build around. I think if you can get 2 Thopters out of this, you're already like doing okay. But once you get 3 or 4, you're just like way ahead of the game.
Yeah, the third one is the one where you really pulled ahead. The tricky part is that you have to cast the artifact spell. Don't confuse that with have an artifact enter the battlefield under your control, which obviously would be busted with this because it would go infinite. But also, it could just say, whenever a non-Thopter or whatever. No, like when you make servos, this it doesn't trigger this. You have to actually cast them from your hand, and that is, well, I shouldn't say from your hand, but you know what I mean. You have to cast it, and that is, it limits it a lot, right? I mean, it's just hard to have that many artifacts, even the third one after you play this. That said, like you said, when you hit that third Thopter, you're really doing it. The second one is okay. 1 Thopter or 0 Thopters it's reprehensible. Like you can't pay 4 mana for a Thopter.
No, that is very inefficient.
Yes.
I would want to play this in a deck that has like maybe ways to bounce your own artifacts, like
to loop them or something.
Yeah, and just tons of artifacts, which is pretty simple. I mean, that's where the card tells you to go, but it's a pretty huge reward.
It is. It is a good long-term reward, though. Again, you just run out of cards. You do. You just don't get to have... It's not like you just get to play an artifact for the rest of the game. You just don't. You draw 1 card per turn, I'd give it a C build around. I just think that it's funny. It's just too inefficient.
All right. Well, I like it at B build around. I think the power level's there.
Okay. Efficient Construction, C and B respectively, both on the build around camp. What about a Hinterland Drake?
It's a 2 and a blue for a 2/3 flying Drake at common, and it can't block artifact creatures. The card looks quite good to me.
Good. I'm in.
Yeah, it can't block servos or other random artifact creatures or Thopters, but it can block everything else. And it's a 3 mana 2/3 flyer that can kind of get in there if you need it to. I think Hinterland Drake's a fine card. It's a C, but
I agree. I think it's a good card too. What about Ice Over?
1 and a blue enchantment aura at common. Enchant artifact or creature. Enchanted permanent does not untap during its controller's untap. So it's a malfunction, except it only costs 2 mana, but it doesn't tap the thing. So you need to either put it on a tap thing, so you got hit by it once, or you put an untapped one, but that's a little sketchier, because then your opponent just leaves it back to block with. Right.
Yeah, these effects, for only 2 mana, it's okay, but man, it's just... so hard to engineer, right? Like there's scenarios where you're pretty happy to have this, but it's not all of them. I mean, in any case, your opponent gets to use the thing that they had once before you have any say in it whatsoever. And if you're trying to be proactive, like attacking, this can change a race. But if your opponent's on the defensive, your Ice Over may just never have a target. Thankfully, it's in blue, where you're often not attacking in the set from what it seems, but... I don't love this card. I really don't. I think it's a kind of card that you begrudgingly play as kind of bad removal but you really don't want too many of these in your deck.
Yeah, my guess is it's like a D plus.
Yeah, that's what I was going to give it to, a D plus. It's a sad card. Next is Illusionist Stratagem, which is 3 and a blue for an instant. It's uncommon. It says exile up to 2 target creatures you control, then return those cards to the battlefield under their owner's control. Draw a card.
So the idea is you double trigger Revolt or enter battlefield effects, or you go like block, save both my blockers, draw a card. I think the card is good. It does a lot of different things. It's a little dirtily, but you can afford to have one of these cards in your deck, I would say.
Yeah, the interesting things comes when you put more than one of these, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
when you go too deep on these and then you draw 2 of them and like 1 creature, it's like pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. You can just cycle this, right?
You can play it with no targets, but that's also pretty bad.
Yes, I'm looking for worst case scenarios here. This type of card has significant upside. It also just reeks of one of those cards that looks like a card that I am excited about and might play and then never do. Am I never going to play this?
Yeah, you're going to play this.
Okay, because I like it, and the draw card's real.
I really want to give it a C, but I think it's probably like a C minus.
I'm going to give it a D. I just think, it'll fit sometimes, but you really can't play too many cards that have this type of effect. You need to maximize on them when they go. Leave in the Dust. I like this one. This is 3 and a blue instant. It's common. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Draw a card. I like effects like this in general, but when they give you the card back, it's really good. Like you're not just doing the tempo thing. You're also replacing the card. And I think that's really important.
That's the biggest disadvantage of bounce in general is that you're down a card.
Yeah.
But no, Leave in the Dust I think is great. I think it's you're just going to be able to play it on a card that, they spent this much mana on a lot of the time. And sometimes you'll play it on a more expensive card. And either way, it's going to be good because it doesn't cost you a card. So
yeah,
I have it at C+.
I like it at C+ as well. It doesn't hit B range for me because it is still 4 mana, but instant speed ways to interact with your opponent's board is good, and this is non-land permanent. So don't forget that. You can do some pretty cool stuff with that, including returning your own stuff. It's a pretty flexible card. Next is Metallic Rebuke. It's 2 and a blue for an instant. It's common. It says counter target spell unless its controller pays 3 mana, and it's got improvise. 3 mana counter spell, but sometimes it's a little cheaper.
This card has pretty high upside because you can
kind of does.
If like an artifact of play, you're just like play another artifact, off curve, leaving an island up, and then just rebuke their creature for 1 mana on their next turn. Like that's a pretty big swing. So
that is a big swing. It's interesting. I wonder if this one actually does. Normally the 3 mana conditional counter spells don't make the cut often in limited. You need a reason to play them. They're not the kind of card that you just take and put in your deck. This one though gets cheaper, which I don't know. Does that change it?
Yeah, this has the potential for significant upside. See, the problem with like a 3 mana counter normally is best case you're trading 3 mana for their spell, and the worst case is they didn't play a spell into your open mana. For with Metallic Rebuke, you can actually get really far ahead if you're like play a 4-drop on turn 5, pay 1 mana Rebuke on your 5-drop. Like that's a beating.
That's insane.
So I'm not still.
So is it like a C?
Card. I think it's a C though.
Okay, yeah, that's because I think your average, like without improvise, this would be a D, right? You just wouldn't really want to play it very often. But okay, Metallic Rebuke, that is an interest. I'm going to keep my eye on that one. That does have a high blow up potential. I think it's going to come up a lot. Negate, it's back. 1 and a blue, instant counter target non-creature spell. Assuming it's a sideboard card, though it can counter
you can main deck it sealed if you really want.
I'm just going to give it a sideboard grade, and maybe somebody will prove me wrong, but that's where I think it goes. What about Reverse Engineer?
It's 3 blue.
This should be a creature, by the way.
Why is that?
It's the Reverse Engineer. It's not a thing.
So it's 3 blue for a sorcery at uncommon. It has improvise and it says draw 3 cards. So, I mean, I do like it.
You could have started off with draw 3 cards and probably just had me, muddle through the rest and be like, this card's great.
I've cast some Tezzeret's Ambition in my day, and this is a lot better than that. So
definitely,
I'm not complaining about this. I think it's a high enough reward, especially since card draw getting cheaper is a pretty big game because then you can play the cards more efficiently. So I'm gonna say this is a C plus.
Yeah, I go C plus as well. It's still a little expensive to reverse engineer something, but I like it. I mean, obviously I like it. Salvage Scuttler is 4 and a blue for a 4/4 crab. Hey, Shelly. Looking good with that new shell. Uncommon. Whenever Salvage Scuttler attacks, return an artifact you control to its owner's hand. That's not a May ability, is it?
It is not, but you want to put this in decks where it's an upside, because you can bounce creatures or artifacts with enter the battlefield triggers. You can also, this sets up Revolt quite nicely. So a 5-mana 4/4 is like not ahead of the curve. That is actually just the curve. So
yeah, that passes the vanilla test, but you're not, it's a medium
You're really
pass.
putting this in your deck if it has positive synergy, which makes me feel like this is a C minus.
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's a D plus or a C minus, but there's going to be decks where it's like, heck yes, and you're kind of doing busted stuff. It's picky, Shelly. Next is Shielded Ether Thief. 1 and a blue for an 0/4 Vidalcan Rogue at uncommon. It's got flash, so it's a 0/4 with flash for 2 mana. And whenever Shielded Ether Thief blocks, you get an energy. And you can tap it and pay 3 energy to Q Angel singing, draw a card.
Oh, yeah.
Ooh.
I like Shielded Ether Thief because, first of all, you're going to block most cards that cost 2 or 3 mana fairly well. You're probably going to get a free energy the first time because it has flash and they'll attack into it. And then it gives you a very respectable energy sink for the late game.
Did you see the flavor text?
I did, yes.
That's pretty sweet. Big fan. Want to play a lot of these. I know I'm supposed to be attacking or whatever, but Shielded Ether Thief looks cool. This card's just really sweet. I don't know how good it is. Like you said, it's a respectable engine in the late game. I mean, energy for cards is something that we haven't seen much of. You do have to tap it, which is kind of interesting. I dig it. I don't know. I want to go B minus, but it's probably a C plus, so I'll go C plus.
Yeah, I like C plus on Shielded Ether Thief.
I don't think I'm going to go quite that high on Shipwreck Moray, our next card. It's 3 and a blue for a 0/5 fish. It's common. When it enters the battlefield, you get 4 energy, which is quite a bit. And you can pay an energy to have Shipwreck Moray get +2, -2 until end of turn. It does not have flying.
It does not have flying, that is true. It's an underwater creature.
Correct.
I like this card.
Island Walk. Do you like this card?
I mean, it's an 0/5 or a 2/3 or a 4/1, and it gives you a lot of energy to play with. I think that's flexible enough that it's worth 4 mana.
I just wish it had like a power. Like if it was a 1/4. I mean, I know it doesn't match up with the +2 -2 thing, but just an 0/5 to me is like so meh. Am I too down on that? Is that like a removal spell? Okay.
Look, it's an 0/5, so it can block. They're like 4/4. Or if you need it to, you can amp it up to a 4/1 to trade for something decent as well.
Okay. I'm coming around. I like the 4 energy. That's the abstract part because it gives us something to spend it on. But like, if I have a lot of other good stuff, right? If I have other good energy things, I mean, I've learned that getting 4 energy from one card is quite powerful. All right, you've talked me up to a C. Where were you going to go?
I'm going to say it's a C.
Okay, you did it. You're a real politician. Yeah, Shipwreck Moray gets a C. Skyship Plunderer. What does this one do?
1 and a blue for a human pirate. 2/1 flying at uncommon. So
pirate?
Flying, yeah.
Cool.
And whenever Skyship Plunderer deals combat damage to a player, for each kind of counter on target permanent or player, give that permanent or player another counter. So it has the same trigger that the green uncommon did, which is you choose a permanent or player and give them an extra counter of that kind.
Okay.
But it's a 2 mana 2/1 flyer. This card seems great.
Yeah, wow. This is very likely to hit.
2 mana 2/1 flyer with upside seems really good.
It does. I like this a lot. I would actually give this a B minus.
Yeah, I like B minus for Skyship Plunderer.
Yeah, it's a pushed card. Plus, it's a pirate. That's just kind of sweet. Take into Custody is next. It's blue, instant, common, tap target creature. It doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step.
Not a big fan of this.
I don't like this card either.
It's just you're down a card and you have to be super aggressive to really be able to spend a card in this way, even though it's cheap mana-wise. Blue decks just don't seem to fall into that camp, so I think Take into Custody is probably just a D.
Yeah, every word you said is what I was going to say. D for Take into Custody. Trophy Mage. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard at uncommon. When it enters a battlefield, you may search your library for an artifact card with converted mana cost 3. Reveal it and put it into your hand, then shuffle your library. So 3 exactly.
Trophies cost 3, trinkets cost 1, and treasure cost 6 or more.
Ah, wow. Dude, so we've got like a like a conversion rate for the currency in Magic now?
Yeah, apparently.
All right.
I like Trophy Mage. If you have one good target, it's good.
Yes.
If you have one good target and one like mediocre target, it's great.
Yes.
And if you just have one mediocre target, it's playable but not fantastic. And then with no targets, it's unplayable. That averages out. I still think it averages out pretty high, though. I think that
I do too.
Leaves me at like B minus.
Me too. Yeah, this is just solid card advantage in the decks that have, like you said, how you broke down the targets, and like you said, if you don't end up with any targets, don't play Trophy Mage. It's not that hard. I'd still play it even with one mediocre target, though. Just drawing a card. I mean, it's good.
So even a 2/2 draw like a real card too, not like a
draw a spell.
Yeah,
a castable spell. Yeah, that's good. Last blue card is Windkin Raiders. It's 4 blue for a 4/3 with flying and improvise. This is a human artificer at uncommon. I like.
Oh yeah, Windkin Raiders is great. Much like the other improvise cards, only 1 mana overcosted, and this the 4/3 flyer is like a really good upside. So
yeah, it is funny. They really did cost them all at 1 over. If you're getting them for 1 less than it says, then you're like thumbs up. I would play that. And if you're getting it for any cheaper than that, it's like pretty busted. Like a 4 mana 4/3 flyer in current limited is a good strong card.
Yeah.
Wouldn't have hated that 1 extra toughness. There are some burn spells that still kill it, but Windkin Raiders is very good. I would go. I would go B. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, B for Windkin Raiders. Blue looks fun. It looks a little confused. We've got 2/1 flyers and 4/3 flyers, and we've got 0/5s and stuff on the ground. I guess those go well together. What am I talking about? So whatever. We'll see. But I'm, as often is the case, I'm most interested in blue. Okay, black, last color. Aether Poisoner. This is the last of that cycle that we've been tracking, the new thriving creatures. It's 1 and a black for a 1/1 with Death Touch. And you get 2 energy when it ATBs, and whenever it attacks, you can pay 2 energy to make a servo.
Big fan of this one as well.
Love it. Love it.
Great blocker. It's not actually that good of an attacker. Like, it always trades, but if they have a random 1/1, you're not like in love with doing that. But the fact that it gives you 2 energy, can block and kill anything, and then can attack into like a 3/3 and make a servo. That all adds up to, I think, a C+ for me.
Yeah, the other thing I like about cards like this is they're applicable in the late game and the early game. And that just, that means a lot. Plus, man, if they're playing like a green deck or something, these cards are so annoying for them because they want to jam with their big green creatures, and you're just like, sure, trade my 2-drop for your 5-drop or whatever. And that makes these kind of cards good in the late game too. What did you give it?
C+.
C+ for Aether Poisoner. I'm on board. C+. Alley Strangler, another solid little card here. 2 and a black for a common Aetherborn Rogue. It's a 2/3 with Menace.
2/3 Menace, kind of hard to take down in combat.
Agreed.
Not like anything spectacular.
It is not.
It's just a straight up C.
I think so too. But it's like, it's got its eyes on C+. It wants to be a C+. Alley Strangler, C. Cruel Finality. Oh man. So here comes some of the black removal. We've got some nice stuff here. This one is 2 and a black for an instant. It's common. It says target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. Scry 1.
Yeah, card is fine.
I like it.
Or better than fine even.
Yeah, it is.
Basically, since it's a 3-mana removal spell that does a pretty good job, you can also like shrink a creature in combat if it's a little bigger.
Yeah, that's also, a big part of the equation.
Which is like a good half card.
Mm-hmm.
I have this at C+. I could be talked into B-, I guess.
Yeah, I'm going to go B- for Cruel Finality. Right, I just think you're going to take it and play it often enough that it's at that level.
All right, B- for Cruel Finality.
How about Daring Demolition? How do you like removal?
Yeah. It's 2 black sorcery, common, destroy target creature or vehicle. So,
So 4 mana sorcery. Yes, yeah, that is what it reminds me of. And it's sorcery speed removal that can actually kill a stupid vehicle.
It can also kill like smart vehicles too. I just think of Daring Demolition a B.
Smart vehicle, like a smart car?
Yeah, like the self-driving.
It can kill Teslas or whatever. You gave it a B?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was going to give it to. It's just super solid removal. And by the way, Cruel Finality, Daring Demolition, both at common. Like that is some nice removal there for black. Defiant Salvager is 2 and a black for a 2/2 Aetherborn Artificer. It's common. And it has an activated ability. Sacrifice an artifact or creature. Put a +1/+1 counter on Defiant Salvager, but you can only do it anytime you could cast a sorcery. So you will not be doing this in combat or in response to instant speed removal, burn spells and the like, which really does make it a lot worse.
This is a card that you're not really playing unless you either are going very deep on fodder or really, really want Revolt to work.
Yeah.
And as such, I'm just not a big fan of the card.
I'm not either. You can't save your creatures from removal spells to get a bonus. Right. Yeah. So the sorcery speed thing is a real dagger for a card like Defiant Salvager. It completely changes the power level of a card like this. If that clause wasn't there, this card would be really good, and it's just not. So is it a D? Like you said, it has a narrow spots where you're actually probably okay to run these, but I think on average it's probably just a D.
Yeah, I think Defiant Salvager is a D.
Okay. Right back on the quality of removal here. Fatal Push. This one's gotten a lot of talk. It's black for an instant. It's uncommon this time. And it says destroy target creature if it has converted mana cost 2 or less. But it's also got Revolt. Destroy target creature if it has a converted mana cost 4 or less if you've got Revolt.
Yeah, very solid removal. It's similar to Shock in that it's going to kill cheap creatures throughout the course of the game. 4 mana, and then you can set up situations where it kills something slightly bigger. Not as good as it would be in Constructed, but still quite good. I think it's a B, even though I
do too.
Daring Demolition actually might be slightly better, but I think Fatal Push is still a B.
I do too. Instant speed is very, very flexible too.
Yeah.
Plus, apparently they couldn't fit the flavor text "This is Sparta" onto this card.
Yes.
Fenhauler, 6 and a black for a 5/5 insect that can't be blocked by artifact creatures. Yeah, it's got improvise. You knew it did. They're not going to make you pay 7 for a 5/5 like this. So
this one I'm less excited about.
This one doesn't. Yeah, we would not pay 6 mana for a 5/5 here.
Because the text is just, I think, not that great. It's just okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give Fenhauler. I think I'll give it a C because I think
do too.
You'll still play it in your decks, but it's just nothing spectacular.
I agree. The other ones have been kind of felt like nudged a little. This one just feels kind of a lot more on the fair side of the scale. But the more artifacts you have, the more likely you are to play a Fenhauler. Because getting this thing out early is pretty scary. Foundry Hornet, 3 and a black for an insect. It's a 2/3 with flying. It's uncommon. And it says when Foundry Hornet enters the battlefield, if you control a creature with a +1/+1 counter on it, creatures your opponents control get -1/-1 until end of turn. It's a bizarre upside, but it is upside nonetheless.
It's not going to be active all that often, and even when it is, they might not have a creature where the -1/-1 is relevant, but it's still a 4-mana 2/3 flyer. So, like you said, it's upside. It's a card you'll probably play in decks with +1/+1 counters and hope to pick something off, or attack a 2/2 and do a 3/3 and play this post-combat.
Yeah. I wouldn't worry about that so much, though. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so conditional on so many levels. Like, you have to have this thing, you have to have the Hornet, you have to be able to cast it, and they have to have it matter. That's a lot. When it does, hooray. That's great. But you better be happy with a 2/3 flying for 4 in your deck if you're going to run it, because it's just not that often that you're going to get the ability triggered.
Yeah, I'm not sure where that leaves the card, though. I think it leaves it at like C+.
Yeah, I give it a C. It might be a C+. The times when you do get the ability and it wipes out some small creatures or some servos, it's really good. Okay, C+. Yeah. C+ for Foundry Hornet. I'm on board, yeah. What about Fourth Bridge Prowler?
Black for a 1/1 human rogue at common, and when it enters the battlefield, you may have target creature get -1/-1 until end of turn. So...
God, that thing has to be killing stuff to make it good, doesn't it?
Yeah. I would play one of these in, I think, pretty much all my black decks. So
really?
I'm not gonna go deep on them, but having one to start out with to pick off an X1, like, there's like 2/1 first strikes in red and that sort of thing.
There's the 3/1 artifact. There's a bunch of 1 toughness in white.
2 mana 3/1 in white.
Yeah.
So
am I crazy to want to sideboard this and not?
No, you're not crazy. I think you will end up running one, but it's not insane not to.
Because I mean, it is if you don't kill something with it, it's a disaster.
Yeah,
I'm going to give it a sideboard. I'm going to give it a sideboard C.
All right, I'm just going to give it I think a C minus.
Okay. Gifted Etherborn. Oh, baby, this one's good. Black, for an uncommon Etherborn vampire. This one's got a cousin from Zendikar. It's a 2/3 Death Touch lifelink.
Yeah, great card.
Boom.
Just a straight up B.
Love it.
If it had flying like the Nighthawk, it would obviously be great. That card is an A, but still, this is a B.
This is a very solid
chip
B.
in for a good life swing, trade for something really hard to take down in combat.
Also, by the way, I have to note here that we have seen multiple Death Touch creatures in the set, even 2 already just in black here. And that does make cards like Prey Upon go down a bit in value. Just
Sure.
little thing, but keep that in mind going back to my grade on Prey Upon. You have to keep these type of things in mind. There's 100 of these in every set, but hey, that's the fun of it. So B for Gifted Etherborn. That moves us to Gonti's Machinations, which is black. For an enchantment, it's uncommon. It says, whenever you lose life for the first time each turn, you get an energy. You can pay 2 energy and sacrifice the Machinations to have each opponent lose 3 life and you gain life equal to the life lost this way.
This card seems very bad to me.
What the hell is going on here?
It's not a build around, I don't think, because it's just not worth it. Like,
No, you just sack it and it's gone.
Energy a turn is just not that good, and then the sack to drain them for 3, that's just not good either. So
What's going on with this thing? I mean, I guess it triggers Revolt, and going. It's just probably enough. The only saving grace that I have is 2-headed giant ?
Drain them for 6. Oh, yeah.
You gain 6, whatever. I think Gonti's Machinations is just an F. Ironclad Revolutionary. This guy looks like kind of mean. 4 black for a 4/4 Etherborn Artificer at uncommon. When Ironclad Revolutionary enters a battlefield, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you do, put 2+1/+1 counters on Ironclad Revolutionary, and each opponent loses 2 life. What do you make of this card? I can't even decide if I like this at all.
Is this even better than Cal Prowler?
I don't think it is on average.
Yeah, and it's not like that card was great. So
and that card was bad.
I'm going to say Ironclad Revolutionary is pretty much like a D.
I think so too. Like, what's the trick here? Why is this an uncommon that has all this stuff going on and seems like it should be awesome? And when you read it, you're like, what? So I can get a 6/6 and with a marginal upside, but at a fairly steep cost?
Does not seem exciting to me.
No. D?
I like it at D.
Okay, Ironclad Revolutionary gets a D. What does Night Market Aeronaut do?
3 black for a Etherborn Warrior at common. It's a 2/2 flyer and has Revolt. It gets a +1/+1 counter. So 4 mana 2/2 flyer, unexciting. 4 mana 3/3 flyer, marginally exciting.
Yes, exciting. I play that every time.
Just exciting. Mm-hmm. So this card is probably going to be a 4 mana 2/2 flyer like 70% of the time, and a 4 mana 3/3 flyer like 30% of the time. That seems playable, but not exciting.
Did you hypergeometric calculator that, or?
I did, but in a deck built around this, where you have like 2 or 3 of these or other Revolt cards, and then like some good sack outlets, then yes, this card moves up to like a C+. But my initial grade of this would be C-.
I agree. I think C- for Night Market Aeronaut, just for inconsistency's sake. Though this Revolt thing, especially the ones like this that get a counter and go from being kind of unplayable to kind of good, really make me wonder, if you can just build a straight up Revolt deck, right? That's the question I have. Is it just you're going to be relying on Revolt or manufacturing it in weird ways? Or are you going to be able to just say, no, if you want to include the cards in your deck, you can just make sure that you get Revolt when you want it. It's just a matter of, do you have the payoffs? And if that's the case, then these type of cards go up a bit for me. But my assumption is that it's going to be kind of tricky to get Revolt going, and you're not going to be able to just do it on, whenever you want.
Agreed.
I'm willing to be proven wrong there. Perilous Predicament. 4 and a black for an instant at uncommon. Each opponent sacrifices an artifact creature and a non-artifact creature. Ooh.
Pretty decent value here. I mean, even if the artifact creature is going to be a servo some percentage of the time, this is still a solid 2-for-1.
You're getting a 2-for-1 no matter what. God, I don't know, dude. This is weird because, generally speaking, edict effects, especially expensive one like this one, really aren't very good. But
Yeah.
this one's weird. Like,
Well,
sacrifice your worst artifact creature and your worst actual creature. Is that still bad?
the main blocker for edicts would be servos, but servos don't protect their non-artifact creatures. They need to sacrifice an actual non-artifact creature. So I think that you'll always play this card, and you might sideboard it out against the right deck, but like I think this card is just going to be decent. Not like insane or anything, but I have it at C+.
Is the fact that an instant, does that change
Sure.
much for you? I mean, it's upside, but like, does it really affect, I guess?
Well, you can leave up
combat?
5 mana and then maybe make a trade in combat for their like 2/2 and then cast this card.
Right, or you can just get into combat, make them block, and then say Perilous Predicament and just put them in one.
Yeah, that could also work.
Wow, this is one of the hardest cards to evaluate I've seen in this set. I honestly have no idea. This could be one of the better uncommons, or this could be trash.
Well, part of it is like even from game to game, it's going to vary wildly on how effective it is.
Yes, that's a good point.
So,
What did you say you wanted to give it as a starting
I
point?
like it at C+.
Okay, sure. C+. And like you said, I think it's going to, like, depending on the deck, if you're playing a go wide deck, this card loses a lot of value. If you're playing a green-red deck or something, it's probably pretty good. God, maybe it's not. I don't know. Wow. Perilous Predicament. More to come on that one. Really hard card to grade. Renegade's Getaway is our next card. It's 2 and a black for an instant. It's common. It says target permanent gains indestructible until end of turn, and you get a servo.
Yeah, it's a 3 mana combat trick. It reminds me of Survive the Night from Shadows over Innistrad.
Mm-hmm.
And
I don't like it.
This card, like, getting a 1/1 is worse than getting a clue.
Yes.
And it doesn't give +1/+0. So
yes.
that card wasn't great.
Yes.
So.
No, I'm off of Renegade's Getaway. I think I just want to get away from it in general.
Bam. Yeah, I like this at D then.
Yeah. I'm going to give it an F. I just don't want to play the card. I just don't think it's good.
All right.
You got to take a stand sometimes. Resourceful Return. 1 and a black sorcery. A common, return target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. If you control an artifact, draw a card. That's some card advantage.
This is going to be a 2-for-1 easily enough in the late game.
I
You're
agree.
not casting Raised Deads until the late game anyway, and
Yes.
just having an artifact in play is not that hard. So
No.
I like this at C, but
Me
with the
too.
caveat that you don't really want to play multiples all that often.
Yeah, that's the key, right? Is that Resourceful Return can be one of your sources of some type of card advantage or recursion, but you can't pile it up with a whole bunch of other cards that don't do much. And you should have a decent amount of creatures in your deck too, because it only returns creatures. So, 15-ish, maybe a couple more would be good, just so that, you give yourself the best chance to make sure that you're getting, have a target for it. Because the times when you don't have a target are when it really stings you. But I like Resourceful Return as a C. That is a decent little source of card advantage. Also goes up if you have bombs in your deck. Sly Requisitioner. What does this one do?
4 and a black for a Artificer Human at uncommon. It's a 2/2 with Improvise. So 5 mana 2/2 Improvise. It says whenever a non-token artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a servo.
So, all right. So it's a 5 mana 2/2, which is awful, but it's got Improvise, which still seems kind of awful. Because
And then whenever your non-token artifacts dies, you get a 1/1. So it doesn't go infinite, but this card seems pretty bad to me.
I can't imagine the scenario where you're just like, we're breaking it wide open here.
Yeah, like what are you just putting a bunch of Prakata Pillar Bugs and Narnam Cobras into your deck and just being like, yeah, we're doing it?
Yeah, you're. Yeah, that is not exciting. And the truth is that even though it has Improvise, so you're never paying or rarely paying the full 5 mana for this card, I don't really care. Like, even if you played it on turn 2, it's not that impressive as a body. So getting it cheaper later doesn't really, impress me that much.
Yeah, the card is
It feels like it should have more going on, but I don't like it.
it's a build around, but I think it's like a build around D.
Yeah, me too. Build around D for Sly Requisitioner. One more card. Vengeful Rebel. What does this one do?
2 and a black for a 3/2 Etherborn Warrior at uncommon. Revolt, give a creature -3/-3.
Well, give one of their creatures -3/-3?
Yep.
Woo!
I think
That's
this
a
is what
Revolt
the hard
payoff.
people wanted to-
Yes.
You can set up Revolt, but you don't need them to have a tapped creature. You can just kill one of their creatures. Granted, it has to have 3 or fewer toughness, but that's not that hard to figure out. So And black has more support for Revolt, or it has like some mana-less support for Revolt, like the Scavenger. So I think Vengeful Rebel is going to end up being quite good.
I do too. This card looks like I'm going to give it a B, but I wouldn't be shocked if we saw down the line that it was more because you don't have to cast. It's not a turn 3 play. It doesn't have to be a turn 3 play, right? You can play this significantly later in the game and have Vengeful Rebel still be very solid. Picking off a real creature.
Yeah.
So what do you want to give it?
I would give it a B.
Yeah, I give it a B as well. Okay, that will do it. That finishes up black. I don't think we have any other cards, right? We already went through the colorless and the multicolored. I didn't see any lands. Were there any lands? No?
There's only one land in the set, Spider of Industry, and it is a rare.
It is a rare, so that's next week. Okay, well, that does it then. The set looks kind of exciting, right? It's going to be 2 packs of this and 1 of Kaladesh, so, we're going to get to see a lot of these cards. And I'm really curious about Revolt. That's the huge question mark for me. Improvise just looks cool, and we've got some neat ones. I really want to play that stupid 0-4 blocker that draws cards with energy. That's the card, for some reason, that's standing out to me the most. I don't know why. What do you think about the set?
Looks interesting. The themes don't seem like super linear, so I'm interested to see how those land, because Improvise and Revolt both seem like light touches as opposed to maybe Energy, which looks like it's going to go pretty deep.
Where you rewarded you for having a ton of it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to do it for the set review here for Aether Revolt Commons and Uncommons. We want to thank our sponsor once again, channelfireball.com. For any cards in here that caught your eye and you want to get them ordered, you can head on over there right now and pre-order. And as well as individual cards, you can order sealed products. So if you want to get a box and maybe a few packs of Kaladesh so that you can do a draft with your friends and you want it to show up as soon as possible, you go get it pre-ordered and boom, it'll be at your door. The instant they can ship it, they'll ship it to you and you'll have it ASAP. And that is the way to go. Channelfireball.com. If you want to find us on social media, it's an easy thing to do. I'm Marshall_LR and Luis is LSV. You can also check out everything related to the show at lrcast.com. Right on the front page, we have links to all of our relevant content interests, including articles I've written, including Luis's stream, my stream, the YouTube channel for limited resources, the Patreon link that I talked about earlier, anything, the Facebook group, the subreddit, everything's on there right on the front page. So if you want to find us, you will know how to do it. You can even listen to the show right on that front page if that's easier for you. Beyond that, that's going to do it for this one. Next week, we're going to cover the rares and mythic rares of Aether Revolt. Don't miss it. We'll see you then.
So on the heels of Emrakul, Reflector Mage, and Smuggler's Copter being banned in Standard, big news, I wanted to go over the 5 worst cards to ever get banned. Since
this is good.
Not one of the most powerful cards to ever get banned, but there are worse.
Wow. Okay, I got to hear this.
Number 5 is Kird Ape.
They banned Kird Ape?
That card got banned when Extended was first created.
What the hell?
Yeah.
Okay.
Next up would be Rook Egg, and some of these are from a long time ago.
Come on.
So Rook Egg was 3 in a red for an 0/3, and then when it dies, you get a 4/4 rock, and this card got banned.
Yeah, with flying.
Oh, with flying, true.
Wow, they banned that card? I can't believe it. That's not number 1?
Oh, no.
That's terrible.
Actually, Rook Egg might have been restricted, but it was from their first ban restricted list.
I see.
Number 3 was for tournament rules, Divine Intervention. This is a 6 white sorcery from Legends that got 2 divinity counters, and then you remove one each upkeep, and then when you remove the second one, the game is a draw.
What? That has to be the lamest card ever.
And it got banned so that there would not be more draws.
Yes. I wholheartedly approve of this ban. What an awful card.
Ridiculous. Number 2 is Juggernaut. Got banned in the same wave as Kird Ape. 4 mana, 5/3 must attack, can't be blocked by wolves. Yes. And even
dies to lightning bolt.
I know this wasn't like the 90s, but this was still a joke even then.
Okay, it was. Oh yeah, because that just has to be. My God.
Number 1 is a restriction, but it's still. This has to be the worst card ever placed on the list. It's Dingus Egg.
What?
More colorless for an artifact that says whenever a land goes to the graveyard, deal 2 damage to that land's control.
that got on the restricted list?
I cannot and will not explain.